Chapter 683. At the meeting that day, Lin Sun announced a lot of things. For example, after unifying the collateral forces of Lin family, it was an extremely trivial and complicated thing to arrange the duties of every clansman of Lin family. It involved the interests of every collateral force, so it must be properly solved. Otherwise, many small hidden dangers would be buried. Lin Sun gave Lin Zhong full authority to deal with this matter. Lin Zhong and other big shots of the collateral forces would negotiate and discuss it. In addition, there were some arrangements for cultivating the younger generation of Lin family, re-revising the clan rules and regulations, expanding and consolidating the power of heart-cleansing peak. These were all aspects of things that a big clan must face. If they were not arranged well, there would be trouble sooner or later. Fortunately, Lin Sun only needed to provide a general framework for these things, and the specific affairs would be handled by others. At the end of the clan meeting, Lin Sun announced something beyond everyone's expectation, that was, the heir of Lin family. It was also at this time that Lin Sun made it clear that he might leave for a long time before long. For the future development of Lin family, the position of the head of Lin family would inevitably be handed over to one of the clansmen in the future. At the same time, Lin Sun announced the rules of competing for the position of heir of Lin family, indicating that he would select an heir from the 4 collateral forces of Lin family within 10 years. Within 10 years, the clansmen of the 4 collateral forces could participate in the competition, but the final result needed to be finalized by Lin Zhong. As for Lin Zhong, he would master the death of Shatter, a treasure of the clan. When the heir was selected, Lin Zhong would be the protector of the clan and fully assist the new patriarch. This matter was of great significance. It was a decision made by Lin Sun and Lin Zhong after a long discussion. Lin Sun was destined not to stay in heart-cleansing peak all his life. He still had many things to solve. Under such circumstances, it was undoubtedly the safest way to select a new patriarch to take charge of the overall situation of Lin family in 10 years. When they learned the news, the clansmen of the 4 collateral forces of Lin family were in a complete uproar. They could hardly believe it. Even Lin Baiguang, Lin Sisi, Lin Yunheng and other big shots of the older generation were all stunned. No one expected that Lin Sun had already begun to make arrangements for the successor as soon as he took charge of Lin family. This undoubtedly proved that in Lin Sun's heart, he had no greed for the position of the head of Lin family at all. This made many big shots look complicated. If they had known this earlier, who would have chosen to fight against Lin Sun before? Everything was because they had placed too much importance on the War of the Heavenly Tao. On the other hand, the members of the branch family of the Lin clan were excited, their blood boiled, and they were filled with fighting spirit. Today's Lin family had long been famous in the Forbidden City, and its power was like the sun at high noon. Even the top aristocratic forces dared not to offend them easily. It could be said that as long as there were no natural disasters, sooner or later, the Lin family would definitely return to the ranks of the upper class. In this case, if anyone could take charge of Lin family and become the master of heart-cleansing peak, it was no different from reaching the sky in a single bound. In the Forbidden City, he was also a role that could make countless people awe. He could be on an equal footing with the real upper-class nobles. Such a position would be born among the 4 collateral forces. Although 10 years was not a short time, who wouldn't be tempted? Even Lin Huayuan's heart palpitated with excitement. As for Lin Baiguang, Lin Sisi, Lin Yunheng, and the other important figures of the older generation, they were already deep in thought. In these 10 years, they were thinking about what they should do in order to nurture a candidate from their respective clansmen who could shoulder the responsibilities of the Lin family. But they all knew that such a competition was destined to be difficult and fierce. Among the 4 branches of power, it was destined that none of them would watch as a successor to the Lin family appeared in the other side's clansmen. This was the purpose of Lin Sun's arrangement. He wanted the 4 collateral forces to compete with each other. Only in this way could a successor who could take charge of Lin family be selected through layers of assessment and selection. Of course, Lin Sun also arranged Lin Zhong to oversee the overall situation and supervise all this. This was also done to avoid malicious competition, internal strife and fratricide. After the clan meeting, Lin Sun went to the ancestral shrine in the back mountain of Heart-Cleansing Peak alone. He stood in front of the memorial tablets of Lin family's ancestors for a long time. On the memorial tablets there were the names of his great-grandfather Dao Chun, his parents, his grandfather, and all his relatives and friends. They were familiar and strange at the same time, because they had never met. But Lin soon knew that he had already integrated into Lin family. As a lineal descendant of Lin family, some things needed to be done by him after all, such as avenging his parents and relatives. At dusk, the setting sun shone like a fire. Near the ancestral shrine in the back mountain, it was quiet and quiet. When Lin Sun left, he saw Lin Tianlong, Lin Yenshan, and Lin Feifeng who were grounded here. Lin Sun was very calm. He told them some things about the clan meeting, and then left. Lin Tianlong and the others were stunned with complicated and sad expressions. They were sinners who had committed the felony of betraying the clan. Now they were grounded in the back mountain, and probably could not leave again for the rest of their lives. Originally, they were unwilling and resentful, but when they learned about Lin Sun's arrangement of heirs, they completely accepted their fate. They even felt gratified and happy in their hearts. They knew that at least in their own clans, there was likely to be a great man who could really take charge of Lin family in the future. This was hope, which made them willing to atone for their sins here. Even if they spent their whole life in repentance, at least there was hope. In the following days, Heart-Cleansing Peak was busier and busier day by day. There was a scene of prosperity everywhere. Vulture had been practicing in seclusion to refine Devil Calamity powder and restore his cultivation. Lin Zhong, Young Ku, and Zhu Laosan also had their own things to do. They were too busy every day. The collateral forces of Lin family, the villagers of Feiyun village, and the servants and maids recruited on Heart-Cleansing Peak were also very busy. Everyone had an unspeakable fighting spirit. Today's Lin family had solved the internal troubles and repelled the foreign enemies. It was really different from the past. At least in today's Forbidden City, in today's world, almost everyone knew Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak. On the contrary, Lin soon became very idle. In addition to practicing, he received some visits from distinguished guests who had to be received. During this period, Lin Sun also wrote letters to Keystone Business, Ironblood King Ning family, Tumbler Gong clan, and East Sea Yi family respectively to express his gratitude. After all, when he faced Qin Songjia, the king of life-death realm, fortune god sure secretly escorted him. This great kindness could not be forgotten. As for Zhao Tailai, he didn't appear again for a long time. It seemed that he had forgotten what happened in Star-Embracing Pillow and Moon House. Lin Sun was a little strange at first, but later he forgot about it. However, Shen Tua, the chief instructor of Spiritual Tattoo branch of Green Deer School, suddenly came to visit him one day. On the same day, Lin Sun and Shen Tua left Heart-Cleansing Peak together and went to Green Deer School in a chariot. It had been nearly half a month since Lin Sun returned to the Forbidden City from Soul Oblivion Sea. As an instructor of Spiritual Tattoo branch, Lin Sun didn't go to Spiritual Tattoo branch in time to continue teaching, which seemed to be a dereliction of duty. However, according to Shen Tua, this was a trivial matter, and everyone could understand it. When the chariot passed through the central area of the Forbidden City, a fierce battle was being broadcasted on the huge spiritual light curtain. A young man in moon-white clothes, holding a black spear, was fighting with 6 practitioners of reincarnation developing realm above the void. The collision of the dazzling divine splendor caused terrible airflow fluctuations, which were gorgeous and dazzling. Countless pedestrians stood in front of the spirit transmission light screen, and all of them had their heads raised as they stared at the battle unblinkingly. All of them wore nervous expressions, and they were holding their breaths in rapt attention. Occasionally, they would even let out sharp cries of surprise. Lin Sun was stunned. Wasn't this the battle between him and Qin Xuandu and other 6 practitioners of reincarnation developing realm that day? This news began to be broadcasted half a month ago and has been repeated countless times. But every time, it still attracts countless people to watch. It's an unprecedented grand occasion, Shen Tuo explained to the side. His face was filled with emotion. Even he was unable to control his shock when he saw the true scene of the battle for the first time. In today's Forbidden City, if one hadn't heard of this battle, he didn't deserve to be a resident of the Forbidden City. This was the influence of this battle. Until now, the aftermath was still spreading. Imperceptibly, Lin Sun was remembered by more and more people. Child Lin was unparalleled in the world and was crowned all over the capital. How could such a compliment be as simple as it sounded? Now, as long as this sentence was mentioned, almost everyone would think of a name, Lin Sun. Even now, many practitioners in the Forbidden City were complaining that Lin Sun was in the limelight. No matter where they went, whether in pubs, tea houses, or on the streets, they could hear about this guy everywhere. Even the singers in the brothels had written all kinds of songs about Lin Sun and were competing to sing them, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Brother Shen, why did you ask me to go to Green Deer School this time? Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and finally couldn't help asking. Under Shen Tuo's strong request, he had changed the way he addressed Shen Tuo and began to call him brother. In Shen Tuo's view, Lin Sun's identity as a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos was enough for any spiritual tattooist to rely on. What's more, Lin Sun was a peerless talent in the capital. If Lin Sun called him senior again, Shen Tuo wouldn't be able to afford it. P.S. Thanks for the tip from Bookfriend 3052. In addition, I wish you all a happy new year. On the first day of the new year, looking back on 2016, I have a lot of feelings, but everything is over. I also wish you all a more interesting and lively new year than last year. Chapter 684. Actually, Shen Tuo hesitated for a moment and said, I have no choice but to ask you to return to the school this time. I want to ask you for a favor. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Is there anything that Green Deer School can't solve? Shen Tuo smiled bitterly. It's different this time. The situation is a little special. Then, Shen Tuo explained the whole story. It turned out that just yesterday, from the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land located in the ancient Desolation territory, a big shot led some young disciples to the mortal world and came to Green Deer School. Their purpose this time was to select a promising young man from Green Deer School and take him to the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land for cultivation before the catastrophe of Tao broke out in the mortal world. This should have been a good thing, but it was embarrassing that some talented disciples of Green Deer School had already gone to the ancient Desolation territory. For example, Gu Yunting, Song Yi by Lingshi, Zhao Yin, and other outstanding disciples of the young generation were no longer in Green Deer School. Presently, there was no lack of outstanding talents amongst the students that remained in the academy. However, comparatively speaking, they were slightly lacking in maturity. Under such circumstances, the people from the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land were quite disappointed and looked down upon Green Deer School. Originally, this was not a big deal. But today, some students of Green Deer School had a conflict with the descendants of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. When he spoke up to hear, the space between Shen Tuo's brows carried a wisp of gloominess, and there was even a form of indescribable embarrassment and rage. Those fellows are too arrogant. They take the students of my academy to be ants, and their words are filled with arrogance and slander. Then, the students of our school were not convinced and had a conflict with them? Lin asked. Yes, it's a matter of honor and disgrace. Who can swallow this? Shen Tuo's face was gloomy. He was so old, but he was still so angry. It could be seen how arrogant those descendants of the heavens pivot Holy Land were. Lin Sun roughly understood and tentatively asked, "In this conflict, the students of our school—" Shin Tuo's face became very embarrassed and he nodded bitterly. Yes, they were all defeated. First, he was looked down upon and looked down upon. Then, he was defeated in a conflict by someone who looked down on him. This feeling was indeed too sullen and humiliating. All of a sudden, Lin Sun understood Shin Tuo's mood. He patted Shin Tuo on the shoulder and comforted him. "Don't think too much. After all, they are the successors of the heavens pivot Holy Land. Whether they admit it or not, they are really strong." He had seen the strength of the successors of the numinous treasure sacred land, Xiao Ran, Su Xingfeng, and Gong Yangyu. Naturally, he knew that none of the successors of these ancient orthodoxies were simple characters. Compared to them, the students of Green Deer Academy were still somewhat inferior. It wasn't that Lin Sun looked down on them, but that he had experienced it himself. After a comparison in his mind, he roughly judged such a fact. However, after hearing Lin Sun's comforting words, Shin Tuo became more and more embarrassed. After a while, he said, "If the students of our school were defeated by the successors of the heavens pivot Holy Land, it would be fine. But this time, it was just the retainers of those successors." Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help sighing in his heart. Which student of Green Deer Academy wasn't an elite selected from such rigorous examinations as county test, state test, province test, and nation test? It could be said that those students represented the most talented and potential group of the younger generation of the empire, and were the pillars of the empire's future. But now, in the face of provocation and contempt, these students couldn't even defeat the retainers of the opponents. Instead, they were defeated in a mess. It was indeed too shameful and shameful. No wonder Shin Tuo, with his current identity, was so aggrieved and angry. You know, as early as a few months ago, the top students of our Green Deer Academy, such as Gu Yunting, Zhao Jingwen, Zui Yujing, Huang Longshan, and so on, have been sent to the ancient desolation territory. Shin Tuo was very depressed. If some of them were here, I believe this conflict would not have developed into such an unbearable situation. Lin Sun thought about it and found what Shin Tuo said was true. As far as he knew, on the most mysterious spiritual sea list of Green Deer Academy, there were many amazing talents. At that time, Gu Yunting also stepped into this list. Unfortunately, all the disciples who were on the spiritual sea list had already been sent to the ancient desolation territory. Of course, in addition to the spiritual sea list, Green Deer Academy also had a Zhenwu courtyard, in which all the students had reached Tao Insight Realm. But in the same way, these students were no longer in the academy. At this time, in the face of the contempt and provocation of the descendants of the heavens pivot Holy Land, the situation of Green Deer Academy was indeed a little embarrassing. No wonder Shin Tuo came to ask him for help. "But, as an instructor, is it appropriate for me to help?" Lin Sun asked. He was very willing to help. Both Shin Tuo and the Dean of Green Deer Academy had given him a lot of help. Lin Sun had long regarded himself as a member of Green Deer Academy. Naturally, Lin Sun would not stand idly by when such a problem involved the honor of the academy. Alas! Shin Tuo sighed and said with a strange look, "You don't have to worry about this because—" He couldn't go on. Because what? Lin Sun became more and more curious. Because they directly called you to fight with them. Shin Tuo held back for a long time before telling the truth. Lin Sun frowned, keenly aware that the tone of the opponents would not be so friendly. They must have said something unpleasant about him, but Shin Tuo was not in a position to say it. Ho, do they have the qualification to challenge me? Lin Sun smiled, showing his snow-white teeth. It was not that he was arrogant, but that he had killed the real descendants of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure. How could he be afraid of the descendants of another orthodoxy? Hearing Lin Sun's words, Shin Tuo was a little anxious. "Brother, you are not willing to fight with them, are you?" Lin soon was speechless, and his black eyes became deep. He said indifferently, "Of course I will help, but I am afraid that they are not able to fight with me. Let me tell you first, if someone is accidentally killed, don't blame it on me." Shintua gasped and was in a daze for a while. He was excited and happy, but he could not help but worry, because he knew how fierce the lad in front of him would be once he started to fight. This was a master who killed 6 practitioners in the reincarnation developing realm from 2 top aristocratic families, just because of a disagreement. This kind of fierceness was made with real swords and spears, and it was not ambiguous at all. Suddenly, Shen Tuo was a little expectant. Chapter 685. Green Deer School, Zhenwu Courtyard, Martial Arts Practice Field. The atmosphere was deathly silent. The students and teachers who surrounded the martial arts practice field all had ugly expressions. Some were gnashing their teeth in anger. Some were disappointed and frustrated. Some were tightly pursing their lips, their faces livid and sullen. In the seats nearby, 7 or 8 students were injured and breathless. Some were bruised and swollen, some had broken bones, and some had directly fainted. On the other hand, a young man stood at the center of the spacious practice grounds. He had gray hair, a handsome bearing, and a fierce and ferocious aura. With his hands behind his back, his eyes swept across the audience indifferently. With a touch of disdain, he said in a frivolous tone, "You, who is still not convinced?" The field suddenly became restless. The male students were so angry that their eyes were wide open and their teeth were almost broken. The female students were also red in the face and clenched their fists. As for the instructors, all of their faces were ashen and they did not say a word. It had been a quarter of an hour since the beginning of the conflict. 8 students from Zhenwu Courtyard had come out to fight. Each of these students could be regarded as an elite, possessing the cultivation of the Tao Insight realm. When they graduated from the academy in the future, if they joined the army, they would definitely be directly promoted to a commander with real power. If they were in the local area, they would also become an overlord and deter others. But these 8 students, one by one, were defeated on the spot. From beginning to end, no one could withstand more than 100 moves. They were defeated in a complete mess. What made the teachers and students feel most humiliated and ashamed was that the opponent was just a personal servant of a successor of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. At this time, standing in the middle of the martial arts practice field was that servant. His name was Mu Qing, and he was born with amazing combat strength. A single servant seemed to be invincible as he displayed great might in the martial arts practice grounds and defeated the 8 students that received the attention of everyone in their academy. All of this was like a rod that struck fiercely on the heads of those instructors, teachers, and students, and it brought an unprecedented heavy blow to their pride. Needless to say, if today's events were to spread, it would have an immeasurable impact on the reputation of the entire Green Deer School and make the world laugh at them. Why is no one talking? At the center of the martial arts practice field, the disdain in Mu Qing's eyes intensified. In the face of such blatant provocation, some students couldn't help but want to rush out, but they were stopped by the instructors beside them. This wasn't the time to let their emotions affect their decisions. However, this made Mu Qing even more disdainful. He sneered, "Haha, previously when we said that the students of your Green Deer Academy were no good, you guys were unconvinced and thought that we were looking down on and humiliating you. Now that you've seen the truth, what else do you have to say?" This was the territory of Green Deer Academy, but now an outsider was standing here, flaunting his prowess and looking down on everything. This made the teachers and students extremely angry. Some students couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Could it be that the reputation of the academy that had been established for thousands of years is going to be destroyed in a day? Let me. Suddenly, a deep voice resounded, and a man in a gray robe stood out. It's Senior Wang Ying. Many students' eyes lit up. They recognized that the gray-robed man was an outstanding figure of the true martial courtyard. He had been in closed-door training. It was said that he wanted to break through the Tao insight realm. But no one had expected that even Wang Ying would be alarmed. This caused hope to rise in the hearts of the students. Absolutely not. Different from the reaction of the students, the teachers present all paled, one after another trying to stop him. Some time ago, after Gu Yunting and the other peerless characters, Wang Ying could be regarded as one of the top experts in the Zhen Wu courtyard. If he also lost, then in this conflict, their Green Deer Academy would be completely defeated. They would never be able to raise their heads again, and their reputation would be ruined. The consequences would be too severe. Hence, he would rather not fight than lose. In this way, at least there would be a trace of hope and leeway. In the battle of martial arts, there is no such thing as compromise. Today, I, Wang Ying, would rather be defeated than take a step back. Wang Ying's words were resolute, his expression firm, and as he spoke, he had already strode into the martial arts arena. This made the students present excited, one after another cheering for the spirit displayed by Wang Ying. The originally deathly silent atmosphere also became lively. But the teachers present all sighed inwardly. They understood the strength of Wang Ying. To defeat Mu Qing, the hope, was not great. Haha, it seems that you are very popular, but in my opinion, at most you are just another person coming to die. Mu Qing's expression was frivolous, still disdainful. Less nonsense, let's see who's the real deal. Wang Ying obviously also had a stomach full of anger. His figure flashed, and he charged forward, his figure like an angry dragon, his imposing manner astonishing. It has to be said that Wang Ying's battle strength was indeed very impressive. At least in the Tao Insight stage, he could be regarded as a first-class figure. But what made the hearts of the teachers and students cold was that after just over 100 moves, Wang Ying was also defeated. He was struck by Mu Qing's palm. If not for his arms helping him to block the attack, just this palm alone would have been enough to split open his stomach, and he would have died on the spot. Even so, his arms were crippled, his bones shattered, and his entire body was ruthlessly sent flying, landing on the ground dozens of feet away, blood staining the bluestone. The field was suddenly silent, so silent that it was terrifying. All the students widened their eyes, not daring to believe what they had seen, their expressions filled with despair and sadness. Even Wang Ying was defeated in the Green Deer Academy. Who else could fight with Mu Qing? And the instructors' faces were livid. The scene that they least wanted to see had finally happened. Today's matter was destined to be unable to be covered up, and it would soon spread out. At that time, the reputation of Green Deer Academy would be completely ruined. To be able to withstand more than 100 moves from me is not too bad. Unfortunately, there are too many people like you in the ancient desolation domain, and you are not even qualified to enter the heavens pivot Holy Land. Mu Qing looked down on the field. His figure was majestic, and although he was a servant, he had an extremely swift and fierce aura. This made people wonder, if Mu Qing was already so powerful, how powerful would his master be? All the instructors' hearts were heavy, and their faces were gloomy. They were so angry that they had almost reached the point of despair and helplessness. At this time, in the deepest part of the martial arts field, there was a high platform. At this moment, at this time, a slight snort suddenly sounded from the high platform. The snort came from a young man sitting with his back to the crowd. He was dressed in a golden robe and had a head full of golden hair. Even though he was sitting, his back was straight and gave off a dazzling and sharp aura. Everyone knew that his name was Nangong Hua, and he was the young master that Mu Qing had mentioned. He was a successor disciple from the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. Hearing the snort, the originally arrogant and conceited Mu Qing's face immediately changed. He respectfully stepped forward and said, "Young master, did I perform a little unbearably just now? We are here as guests, it's not good to dirty the ground. Nangonghua did not even turn his head, his voice was low and deep, carrying a trace of unique magnetism. Mu Qing heaved a sigh of relief and immediately went forward. He picked up Wang Ying, who was lying in a pool of blood and groaning in pain, and threw him to the students in the distance. Then, he said coldly, "Watch him. I don't want to dirty your territory anymore." With a wave of his sleeve, he cleaned up all the bloodstains on the ground. Only then did he bow towards Nangonghua's back and return to the center of the martial arts practice field. When the teachers and students present saw this scene, they were so angry that their eyes turned red. They actually dared to say that senior brother Wang Ying's blood dirty the ground. Was this a direct humiliation to all of them? On the high platform, Nangonghua seemed to be completely unaware of all of this, or rather, even if he sensed it, he did not want to pay attention to it. His back was still facing the crowd, and he was drinking and chatting with 4 or 5 young men and women beside him, as if he was ignoring everyone present. Those 4 or 5 men and women were also descendants of the heavenly pivot Holy Land. When they saw this scene, they only smiled and retracted their gazes. They did not care at all. They chatted and drank. Wasn't that kind of casual attitude another kind of arrogance and conceit? The atmosphere was very quiet, so quiet that it made it hard for people to breathe. "Oh right, is that Lin Sun here?" In the middle of the martial arts practice field, Mu Qing had once again regained his frivolous and contemptuous attitude. His voice revealed a trace of dissatisfaction. "Didn't they say that he killed 6 reincarnation stage cultivators by himself? How come he has become a coward now, and doesn't even have the courage to come forward to fight?" The moment Mu Qing's words came out, it was as if a barrel of gunpowder had been ignited, causing the students who had long been suppressing their anger to be unable to control their emotions. "Who do you think you are? How dare you slander Instructor Kobayashi? If Instructor Kobayashi were here, would you still be qualified to stand and speak? How dare you scold Instructor Kobayashi as a coward?" Both men and women were angry. Today, Lin Sun had already become a legendary figure that they admired. He was talked about with relish by the world and admired by countless practitioners. How could he be slandered by others? Even some of the instructors could not help but speak out and accuse Mu Qing of going too far. There were signs that the situation was getting out of control. This made Mu Qing frown, and he suddenly shouted, "What a joke! If he has the guts, why hasn't he shown up until now? Do you think I have time to waste with you? Or do you Green Deer School only know how to make noise?" I said, "If anyone is dissatisfied, come out." His voice was like a clap of thunder, spreading all over the field and suppressing the accusations and uproars, which made all the teachers and students change their expressions. "Of course, if you instructors find it unpleasant, you can also come out. I don't mind playing with you." Mu Qing's eyes were cold and full of disdain. This sentence was too arrogant. Originally, it was infuriating enough that he, a mere servant, dared to despise and humiliate them so unscrupulously. But now, he directly called for a fight with the instructors of Green Deer School. This arrogant attitude made the students so angry that their lungs were about to explode. Among the instructors of Green Deer School, there was no lack of reincarnation developing realm practitioners. They would not do such a disgraceful thing. However, being provoked by a mere servant of Mu Qing's pointed at their noses caused their expressions to turn extremely ugly. "Ha ha!" Mu Qing laughed. "It seems that Green Deer School is really disappointing. There is no one worthy of my attention. Now I can't help but suspect that Lin Sun, who is known as the champion of the capital, is also a person who deceives the world to gain fame. He is not worth mentioning. Don't talk about our instructor Kobayashi like that." At this moment, an angry roar was heard. A little fat teenager rushed out and madly rushed toward Mu Qing as if he was desperate. It was little fatty Lu Hui, a student of class C9. He was only a spiritual tattooist, and his strength was not at the same level as Mu Qing at all. But at this moment, when he heard Mu Qing repeatedly humiliate their instructor Kobayashi, he lost control. He was so angry that he was about to go crazy and fight with Mu Qing. The instructors turned pale with fright, and even the students were caught unprepared. When they wanted to stop him, it was too late. A cold light appeared in Mu Qing's eyes. Who was he? An ant-like little guy dared to stand out and fight with his life? He must be tired of living. He decided to be ruthless and give this kid an unforgettable lesson. Buzz. Mu Qing stood motionlessly, waiting for little fatty Lu Hui to come and court death, with a black luster circling around his fingertips. However, to his surprise, a figure suddenly appeared at the scene and stood in front of little fatty Lu Hui. Mu Qing frowned and looked up. It was a young man in moon-white clothes. He was tall and handsome, with deep black eyes and an extraordinary temperament. But soon, Mu Qing didn't take it seriously. He didn't notice anything special about this young man. Who the hell is stopping me? Let go. I'm going to fight with him. How can a dog like him humiliate Instructor Kobayashi? Little fatty Lu Hui roared and his eyes were about to spit fire. He was so angry that he didn't notice who was in front of him at all. You brat, don't you recognize me? A familiar voice rang in his ears, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Little fatty Lu Hui was stunned. As if he had found his soul, he jerked his head up and saw a familiar delicate face. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. He murmured, "My God, am I so angry that my eyes are blurred? Why do I look like I've seen a ghost, Pa?" He was slapped on the back of his head. "You've done well today. If you dare to curse in front of me again, I won't spare you." At this moment, the instructors and students were also stunned. They were angry, hopeless, and helpless. Their emotions were all out of control. Therefore, when they saw the familiar figure standing in front of little fatty Lu Hui, they couldn't believe it and were stunned. Mu Qing didn't notice any of this. He only heard the ant-like little fatty call him a dog. "Kid, get out of here. No one can save this little bastard today." As he shouted, Mu Qing's figure flashed and he slammed his palm towards Lu Hui's head. Surrounded by murderous intent, he had made a vicious move. Previously, he was undefeatable among his peers in Green Deer Academy. Even the instructors dared not speak up. How majestic and arrogant was he! But now, he was insulted by a little fatty who wasn't even at the Tao Insight realm. If he didn't kill him, how could he, Mu Qing, maintain his dignity? Boom! The void exploded and the terrifying palm wind was overflowing with dark light. It was extremely terrifying, causing all the teachers and students to wake up from their daze. Then, they saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. At this critical moment, Lin Sun, who was standing in front of fatty Lu Hui, merely gave a casual slap. With a bang, Mu Qing was ruthlessly sent flying like a fly. Chapter 686. Bang. The sound of the slap was very dull, like a palm hitting a sandbag. Mu Qing was also sent flying like a sandbag. Fatty Lu Hui was dumbfounded. All the instructors present were also dumbfounded. Before, Mu Qing was extremely arrogant. Although he was just a servant, he defeated a group of students and masters of Green Deer School. His contemptuous words and arrogant manner made all the instructors present angry and aggrieved. Yet now, such an arrogant fellow was sent flying like a fly by a single slap. This was too shocking. Lin Sun patted fatty Lu Hui on the shoulder without raising his head. "Are you still standing there looking for a beating? Go back quickly." "Instructor Lin, it's really you." Lu Hui's face was flushed with excitement. "You're really annoying." Lin Sun smiled and casually threw Lu Hui out of the martial arts field. "It's really Instructor Lin." At this time, all the instructors present woke up from the state of shock and completely dared to believe that it was really Lin Sun. "Boy, you're dead." But at the same time, a roar rang out and Mu Qing, who had been slapped out, rushed over. His whole body was overflowing with dark light, his face was livid, and his eyes were full of anger. It seemed that he still couldn't believe that he would be defeated by a single slap. Bang! His figure roared like thunder, and his power was extremely terrifying. His palms and fingers were surrounded by wisps of black Taoist aura, and he suddenly slapped at Lin Sun. Here, the void was shaking and the turbulence was splashing. The scene was terrible. As a servant, Mu Qing could defeat all the students and masters of Green Deer School, which showed that he was indeed an extremely powerful and ruthless character. But with a muffled bang, Mu Qing was hit out again and fell hard to the ground. He saw stars, twitched all over, and almost coughed up blood. But Lin Sun just stood there and didn't move an inch. He just slapped out casually. It was also his casual posture that made Mu Qing more and more unbearable, and the whole audience suddenly gasped. Instructor Kobayashi, he's too strong. Some students were so shocked that they lost their voices. They had absolute confidence in Lin Sun, but at the same time, in their opinion, Mu Qing was not an ordinary character. They had thought that even Lin Sun would have to go through some trouble to defeat Mu Qing. Who would have thought that the arrogant Mu Qing was so pathetic in front of Lin Sun? The contrast was too great. What do you mean by too strong? Instructor Kobayashi has always been this strong. How can the title, fill the capital, be given out for no reason? Some female students argued. They were so excited that their eyes were shining and their cheeks were flushed. They looked at Lin Sun with crazy admiration. Even the teachers let out a long sigh of relief, their faces beaming with joy. The stronger Lin Sun's performance was, the more face they could save for Green Deer Academy. However, when they witnessed Lin's power with their own eyes, they couldn't help trembling. Sure enough, only such a person could kill 6 practitioners in reincarnation developing realm by himself. The silent atmosphere in the field became heated, and cheers rose one after another. The arrival of Lin Sun made all the teachers and students present excited. You are Lin Sun? Mu Qing got up from the ground. His face was ugly, with a touch of surprise and seriousness. Mu Qing was defeated by Lin Sun twice in a row. No matter how stupid he was, he realized that he had met a tough opponent this time. Lin Sun did not speak. His black eyes were calm. He stepped forward and said, "How dare you come to Green Deer Academy and behave atrociously?" An invisible power spread, causing Mu Qing's body to stiffen and almost suffocate. It was as if he saw a towering mountain pressing down on him. Behave atrociously. We are just sparring. The disciples of Green Deer Academy are very weak. Am I wrong? Mu Qing snorted coldly. He suppressed the fear in his heart and faced Lin Sun. He came from the ancient Desolation territory. Although he was the servant of Nangong Hora, the successor disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, he was confident that no one in the lower world would dare to do anything to him. Is that so? Then let's spar too. Lin Sun stepped forward calmly. His expression was indifferent, but he had an imposing manner that could swallow mountains and rivers. Mu Qing was shocked and angry. He had just called out a word when he felt his vision blur. His neck was grabbed and his whole body was lifted up. It was difficult for him to breathe, let alone speak. Too strong. Mu Qing was terrified. When he heard some rumors about Lin Sun, he did not believe them. He thought that they were deliberately exaggerating and spreading false information. But now Mu Qing realized that he had guessed wrong. Unfortunately, he had no strength to struggle at this moment. He was lifted up by the neck like a chick, and then his body was ruthlessly thrown to the ground like a wooden stake. Bang! The muffled sound of bones breaking could be heard. Mu Qing's whole body was overflowing with blood. His whole body twitched violently and he let out a shrill scream. This blow was simply too ruthless. It made all the teachers and students panic in pain. You dare to challenge me with just this bit of ability? Lin Sun sighed. He seemed to be a little disappointed or dissatisfied. Forget it. This is Green Deer Academy after all. If I kill you, the outside world will think that we are bullying others. Then I will destroy your cultivation as punishment." As he spoke, he lifted his foot. "How dare you?" Mu Qing was terrified and angry. He had completely collapsed. Who would have thought that Lin Sun would be so ruthless and actually want to destroy him? "Stop." At this moment, Nangong Hua, who was sitting on the high platform and chatting, could no longer stand by and watch. Crack! However, Lin Sun did not care at all. With a stomp, a powerful force spread out from the tip of his foot and destroyed Mu Qing's inner cave in one fell swoop. Mu Qing's pupils dilated. He still could not believe it. His voice was trembling, frightened, angry, and desperate. His cultivation being destroyed was even worse than killing him. Even if he lived, he was destined to be a cripple from today onwards. A cripple was destined to have no value. The teachers and students present also sucked in a breath of cold air. They were shocked by Lin Sun's methods. Although Mu Qing was a servant, he came from the ancient Desolation realm after all. He was a servant of Nangong Hua, a true disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Just like that, he was cleanly crippled by Lin Sun. The enmity between them was too great. On the high platform in the distance, the descendants of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, led by Nangong Hua, had already stood up and looked at Lin Sun, who was in the middle of the martial arts practice field. Previously, their backs were facing the crowd as they drank and chatted. Their demeanor was casual, but it was a manifestation of pride and conceit. They did not take the teachers and students present seriously at all. But now, when Lin Sun appeared and unceremoniously crippled Mu Qing's cultivation, it made it difficult for them to stand by and watch. Although Mu Qing was a servant, he had come with them after all. He was a servant of Nangong Hua. Mu Qing being crippled was no different from slapping their faces. "You are Lin Sun? It seems like not only are you famous in the lower realms, your temper is also very big." Beside Nangong Hua, a handsome and arrogant young man wearing a crane cloak and a dragon belt around his waist spoke coldly. His name was Ranchen, and just like Nangong Hua, he was a true disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. To be able to become a true disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, all of them could be said to be peerless and outstanding geniuses. Not only Ranchen, Nangong Hua, the other young men and women beside him were all such people. Facing the questioning, Lin Sun seemed to be completely unaware of it. He kicked Mu Qing, who was on the ground, and sent him flying. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he cleaned up the blood stains on the ground. Only then did he say, "His blood dirted the ground of my Green Deer Academy." He looked at Ranchen and said, "What? Do you have any objections?" The teachers and students present were moved. They realized that Lin Sun was seeking justice for Wang Ying, who had just been defeated. Even when facing the descendant of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, his attitude was not polite at all. Ran Chen's face darkened. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Lin Sun. "If you have any objections, then hold it in. I'm not in the mood to discuss who's right and who's wrong with you." All of a sudden, Ran Chen was so angry that his face turned green. He was a descendant of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Even in the ancient Desolation realm, he was a famous figure among the younger generation. But now, in the lower realms, he was continuously being provoked. How could he not be angry? He really doesn't know what's good for him. Haha, interesting. In the lower realms, there's actually someone with such courage. It's really rare. Unfortunately, people like this usually die the fastest. I'll give you a chance. Apologize to us. As long as you can appease our anger, we'll let you go today. The other descendants of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land also spoke up one after another. Although their words were casual, they revealed a sense of superiority. However, Ran Chen seemed to be a little dissatisfied and said, "Let him go? That's too easy on him. If I don't kill this kind of person, how will I have a foothold in the sect in the future?" When the teachers and students in the distance saw this, they were both angry and worried. No matter what, the heavens pivot Holy Land was like a colossus that occupied the ninth heaven. Even the Green Deer Academy was unable to fight against it, nor did they dare to provoke it. And now, seeing Nangong Hua and the others pointing their spear at Lin Sun, their words revealed that they did not intend to let Lin Sun off easily. How could the teachers and students not be worried? However, Lin Sun acted as if nothing had happened. He stood there with his hands behind his back, as if he was thinking about something. He did not make a sound, but from the beginning to the end, he did not show any signs of backing down. It doesn't matter if Mu Qing is dead. After all, he is just a servant. However, I am still his master in name. If I don't help him get some justice, it would make me seem incompetent. At this moment, Nangong Hua spoke. He was dressed in a golden robe and had a head of golden hair. His entire body was dazzling like the sun as he stood there. However, at this moment, his expression was cold and indifferent, giving off a threatening and oppressive aura. Now I can give you a chance to atone for your sins. Surrender to me, become my servant, and serve me. This matter can be forgiven. Nangong Hua's words were calm. His eyes were like golden beams of light as he stared at Lin Sun. This caused the faces of the teachers and students to turn ugly. Let Lin Sun be a servant? What was the difference between this and humiliation? Senior brother Nangong is still too soft-hearted. This time, he is too easy to talk to. Brat, why aren't you bowing your head in gratitude? To be able to serve senior brother Nangong is a precious opportunity that others can only dream of. Chapter 687. Today, Lin Sun could absolutely be called the heavenly son of the empire. No one could compare with him in the younger generation. But now, Nangong Hua wanted Lin Sun to surrender and become a servant to atone for his sins. This was undoubtedly a kind of trampling and humiliation to Lin Sun. Anyone who heard it would be furious. The most outrageous thing was that the purple-eyed youth even boasted shamelessly that if Lin Sun surrendered to Nangong Hua, it would be a disaster and not a blessing. It was a good fortune that others could only dream of. This was going too far. The teachers present were so angry that their expressions changed. These fellows from the heavens pivot Holy Land were truly arrogant to the extreme. The purple-eyed young man had an innocent look on his face, as if he didn't understand. Why are you so angry? We are already magnanimous and tolerant enough. If it was in the past, he would have to atone for his crimes with his death, just because he crippled Mu Qing. The successors of the heavens pivot sacred ground beside him chuckled. Everyone could see that these guys were obviously humiliating Lin Sun in this way, which filled them with righteous indignation. Only Shin Tuo and a few others in the field looked calm with a trace of pity. They suddenly remembered that Marquis Lingtian had said something similar to Lin Sun at the 300th birthday party of the Empress, asking Lin Sun to serve him. In the end, Marquis Lingtianhao was beaten until everyone knelt down and apologized. Even the nobles couldn't stop him. But now Lin Sun was completely different from before. He had once killed 6 great practitioners in the reincarnation developing realm, but the other side still used a similar condescending attitude to make Lin surrender. The result, when he thought of this, Shin Tuo's expression became even more pitiful. He knew that Lin Sun would not be afraid of the ancient desolation territory according to his character. As for the heavens pivot Holy Land, it would not be able to deter Lin Sun. Sure enough, Lin Sun, who was standing in the middle of the martial arts practice field, suddenly smiled. His gaze swept across Nangong Hua, Ran Chun, the purple-eyed youth and the others, and said, "All of you are not bad, at least at this moment. You have successfully aroused my anger." But what? The purple-eyed youth frowned and asked in disdain. Lin Sun said seriously, "I doubt whether you can withstand my anger." It was as if they'd heard an enormous joke. Regardless of whether it was the purple-eyed young man or Ran Chun and the others, all of them couldn't help but chuckle. A playful arc rose from the corner of Nangong's mouth. Soon after, he coldly said, "Oh, I am very curious. Just how powerful is your anger? Can it burn the heavens?" As soon as he said this, the purple-eyed youth and the others laughed even more wantonly. "Burning down the sky isn't realistic, but turning all of you into ashes is a piece of cake. If you don't believe me, why don't you try it now?" Lin Sun's black eyes became deeper and more tranquil. "Ha ha, alright, come, let this young master play with you first. I'll let you understand the difference between a divine dragon in the sky and an ant on the ground." The purple-eyed young man laughed and appeared in the martial arts field in a flash. He pointed at Lin Sun frivolously and said, "Make it clear. If I'm not satisfied with your anger, don't blame me for tearing you apart." "Sure." Lin Sun nodded readily. Junior brother Ing Feng's temper is still a little impatient. It's just the clamor of an ant. There's no need to lower yourself to his level. Ran Chen shook his head. In fact, he also wanted to make a move and teach Lin Sun a lesson. Unfortunately, the purple-eyed young man took the initiative. "This is what it means to do as one pleases. Let's just wait and watch the show. I'm curious if Lin Sun is really as powerful as the rumors say." Nangong's expression was indifferent and calm. Boom. The purple-eyed young man was obviously a frivolous person. Without further ado, his figure was like a flash of lightning, cutting through the void and striking out. The teachers and students present were all nervous. How could a true disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land be ordinary? No matter how confident they were in Lin Sun, they couldn't help but be nervous at this moment. Fast. It was unbelievably fast. As soon as the purple-eyed young man made his movement was so fast that it stunned everyone present. He had already arrived in front of Lin Sun. He had already stretched out a slender palm that was like white jade. It was shining and condensed a bright luster as it slapped towards Lin Sun fiercely. With this kind of attack alone, he could be regarded as the top. If it were other practitioners of Tao Insight Realm, they would be killed on the spot before they could react. Even the reincarnation developing realm instructors present had to admit that the successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land was indeed too powerful. In the Forbidden City, he was enough to look down on the geniuses of this generation. However, in the eyes of these instructors, Lin Sun was no longer a genius of this generation. He was an existence that could compete with the reincarnation developing realm. Therefore, they were destined not to compare Lin Sun with ordinary practitioners of Tao Insight Realm. Bang! Lin Sun's figure was hit. But when the purple-eyed young man showed disdain, he was surprised to find that Lin Sun's figure disappeared like a bubble board. And his palm also seemed to hit the void. There was a feeling of powerlessness like hitting cotton. Oh no! The purple-eyed young man's pupils suddenly shrank. His speed could be regarded as the top in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Few people could match him. But now, someone had dodged in advance, and his speed was 3 times faster than him, so that he couldn't even notice it. This was a little surprising. Whoosh! In a flash, the purple-eyed young man's attack failed. After realizing that it was not good, he had already disappeared in a flash and dodged to one side. But before he could stand firm, he felt his buttocks being kicked hard. Bang! The force was simply like being rammed by a raging bull, causing his butt to seem as if it had blossomed, causing him to grimace in pain as his features warped, and his entire body was like a cannonball that charged forward before smashing onto the ground over 100 m away with a thump, falling flat on his face. At this moment, the purple-eyed young man was so ashamed and resentful that he wanted to die. He had just made a move, and it was speed that he was best at. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even see his opponent. He was kicked in the buttocks and fell in an extremely embarrassing position. This was too shameful. At the same time, all the teachers and students opened their mouths wide and were dumbfounded. They only felt that there was a blur in front of them. Before they could react, the purple-eyed young man fell to the ground like a dog eating shit, This, on the high platform, Nangong Hua, Ran Chun and the others' hearts twitched fiercely. Their faces changed slightly as they realized that something was wrong. Even they almost couldn't lock on to Lin Sun's figure. It was too fast. It was extremely incredible. Bang! The purple-eyed young man, who was so ashamed and resentful that he wanted to die, was just about to get up when he felt a big foot stepping on his buttock. With a thud, he fell to the ground again. His buttocks seemed to have been hit by an iron hammer. It was so painful that he cried out and tears and snot flowed down his face. You can't even bear a trace of my anger. Is this the successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land? I don't think so. Lin Sun stood there, secretly exerting force on the soles of his feet. With a muffled sound, the purple-eyed young man's pelvis and flesh were crushed, and blood flowed out. You. I'm going to kill you. The purple-eyed young man roared, his veins bulging. It was too humiliating. In front of so many people, his buttocks were trampled. If this news spread back to the ancient Desolation territory, he was destined to become a laughingstock. Bang! Lin Sun kicked out, knocking the purple-eyed young man unconscious. He foamed at the mouth, still maintaining the appearance of a dog eating shit. Seeing this, many students couldn't help but laugh out loud. Some of the instructors looked strange. Lin Sun was still like this. Once he took revenge, he would do anything. Friend, you've gone too far. With a loud shout, another successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land made his move. It was a strong man with black hair and a strong and domineering aura. Boom! He held a dark green saber in his hand and slashed forward. The blade set off a brilliant light, tearing a shocking crack in the void. This blow was fierce, even with the taste of a sneak attack. Because who would have thought that the successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land would suddenly attack at this time? Just as his saber was about to hit Lin Sun, a phantom of Bashya suddenly rose from Lin Sun's body. Boom! A horrible restrictive power spread out, and the saber seemed to be fixed, imprisoned 1 foot away from Lin Sun's head. Even the figure of the pitch-black-haired man had become sluggish, and he was like a fish that had been frozen in a layer of ice. He maintained an extremely ferocious and charging posture, yet he was like a clay sculpture, causing him to seem slightly amusing instead. At the same time, Lin Sun turned around and grabbed the saber of the opponent. Then he grabbed the opponent and smashed him to the ground. You've gone too far if you can't beat me. Why are you always in the right? As Lin Sun spoke, he stepped on his opponent's buttocks again. There was a muffled sound like beans being fried. The skin of the man with black hair and a beard was torn, his tendons and bones were broken, and blood flowed. He was even more direct than the purple-eyed youth. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. It was too shameful. They were the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, but they were taken down in one move in the lower world. Their buttocks were kicked to the point that it was like they were punishing their grandchildren. How could they have experienced such a humiliating experience? It was too cruel. All the teachers and students were stunned. 2 successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land were trampled by Lin Sun like dolls. Who would dare to imagine this? Even Nangong Hua and the others felt their hearts twitch. They gasped and couldn't believe their eyes. As companions, they knew the strength of the purple-eyed youth and the man with black hair the best. They were definitely at the top of the Tao Insight realm. But now they were being trampled on casually. They had kicked an iron plate. Their expressions became extremely solemn. Originally, they'd heard some rumors about Lin Sun, but they subconsciously thought that it was impossible for a truly heaven-defying ferocious person to exist in this barren and backward mortal world, and it was definitely an exaggeration. But now they realized that they were wrong. This Lin Sun was clearly an existence of the Tao Insight realm like them, but when he fought, he was much stronger than them, the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. The successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land all looked at Nangong Hua, as if waiting for him to come up with an idea. Just a moment ago, they were still giving pointers to the world, acting as if they were above everyone else. Now that they had changed their attitude, it was truly a bit embarrassing. Nangong Huo was also silent. In his heart, he was extremely speechless. Who would have thought that he would meet such a monster in the lower realms? If they had known earlier, they definitely wouldn't have put on such a high attitude just now. Unfortunately, it was too late for regret. I never thought that in this Green Deer Academy, I would be able to see such an outstanding person like you. Nangong Hu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, I take back what I said just now. Friend, please release my 2 junior brothers first. He was dressed in a golden robe, his golden hair was dazzling, and his entire body gave off a peerless elegance. However, at this moment, when he spoke, it was undoubtedly equivalent to acknowledging Lin Sun, and his attitude had changed. This caused all the teachers and students present to be excited and proud. To be able to make a true disciple of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land take the initiative to lower his head, this was not something that anyone could do. The expressions of the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land were somewhat gloomy and unsightly, as if they had eaten a fly. They felt very aggrieved in their hearts, but they were already cautious and did not dare to rashly make a move against Lin Sun. But Lin Sun did not appreciate it and said with a frown, I haven't even vented a trace of my anger, and you guys are already planning to retreat? This is not retreating. Ran Chen, who was beside Nangong Huo, shouted. Oh, then shall we continue? Lin Sun's expression was very casual. However, this sentence seemed to have a great deterrent force, causing Ran Chen to be speechless. His face turned green, and he gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. In the past, they had always been the ones bullying others. Who would have thought that they would be bullied today? You guys have also experienced the feeling of being aggrieved and angry? How is it? It doesn't feel good, right? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. These words moved the hearts of all the teachers and students present. They knew that Lin Sun was helping them to fight back and wipe out the shame. Previously, Mu Qing was merely a servant, yet he was already flaunting his strength and bullying the Green Deer Academy. He was extremely contemptuous and sarcastic, causing them to feel extremely aggrieved and angry. Now Lin Sun was just returning all of this back to them. Friend, enough is enough. Don't think that the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land are really afraid of you. Nangong Huo's expression was ice-cold. Then let's fight. Lin Sun said without hesitation, You just wanted to take me as a servant. If you are so cowardly, people will look down on you. We have already given you enough face. Do you really want to continue pestering us? Nangong Huo's eyes burst out with a cold light. He was forced by Lin Sun's words to the point that he was truly enraged. His entire person seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Why not? As Lin Sun spoke, he had already taken the initiative to attack. He used the ice dragon steps and with a flash, he rushed up to the high platform in the distance. He appeared extremely powerful and direct. What successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land? He was probably a first-class saint in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea. He was slightly inferior to the top saints like Niu Tunshan and Meng Lianqing. Lin Sun did not know how many people like this he had killed in the past. Even the successor disciple of the Spirit Treasure Holy Land, Gong Yangyu, was unceremoniously killed by Lin Sun. Under such circumstances, how could he be afraid of Nangong Huo and the others? If he let them go today, it would instead make Lin Sun seem very incompetent. Chapter 688. All the teachers and students present were dumbfounded and gasped. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would turn a blind eye to Nangong Huo's retreat and take the initiative to attack. But when they thought about it carefully, they felt exceptionally delighted. These descendants from the Heaven's Pivot sacred ground of the ancient Desolation domain had been too arrogant and bullied them. They had been extremely sarcastic and slandering the Green Deer Academy. Now, it was time for them to have a taste of this kind of destruction. Sigh, I hope it won't get out of hand. At this moment, it was Shun Tuo who was frowning. He was worried that things would get out of hand. After all, no matter how arrogant the other party was, he was still a descendant of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. But Shen Tuo knew clearly that once Lin Sun made up his mind, no one could stop him. Therefore, Shen Tuo was very conflicted. Boom! On the high platform in the distance, the battle had already erupted. Divine radiance blazed while multicolored light flowed about, and it was accompanied by waves of furious shouts and howls. Under the shocked gazes of all the teachers and students, Lin Sun was like a tiger in a flock of sheep at this moment. His figure swept across the high platform, unparalleled. Bang! In an instant, the young man named Ran Chern howled miserably and was kicked away by Lin Sun. He fell to the center of the arena with a thud, twitching all over and unable to stand up. Most horrifying of it all was that his butt seemed to have been kicked into 8 pieces as well, causing fresh blood to gush out, causing him to grimace in pain and groan without end. Bang! Not long after, a crimson-clothed young woman was kicked flying as well, and she fell onto the practice grounds. Her hair was disheveled, and her beautiful face was completely warped. She was very attractive before. Her skin was fair, her appearance was beautiful, and her temperament was as bright as the moon. She was like a fairy from the upper realm, giving off an unapproachable, reserved, and proud feeling. But now, her butt was blooming and she fell in an embarrassing position. Obviously, Lin Sun didn't treat her differently because she was a woman. The red-robed woman screamed, her face filled with shame and anger. She was like a bright moon in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, protected by all the stars. But now, she was violently kicked flying by a youth, and it was even on her butt. This almost caused her to go mad, and she even had the thought of dying. This is considered ruthlessly destroying a flower, right? Some of the male students couldn't bear to watch anymore. Instantly, the female students nearby were unhappy and argued, Bullsh *T. Who does that woman think she is? Does she deserve your sympathy? I think you guys really don't know what's good for you. Instructor Shaolin, this is what it means to repay kindness and enmity, it's truly satisfying. The male students immediately shut their mouths and kept quiet out of fear. Even the women were speaking up for Lin Sun. If anyone dared to argue, they would definitely become the common enemy of all the female students of Green Deer Academy. Some of the instructors could not bear to watch, but after seeing this scene, they wisely chose to turn a blind eye and turn a deaf ear. Bang! Another successor of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Ground was sent flying, and he let out a blood-curdling scream as he tumbled into the arena. These scenes were like thunderclaps, and every single one of them caused the teachers and students present to feel an unprecedented impact. After all, that was the successor of the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Ground. All of them could be said to be peerless top figures in the Paradise Realm, yet they were like puppets that couldn't withstand a single blow before Chen Shi, and they were fiercely trampled upon. This greatly subverted the cognition of the people present. They did not think that the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Ground were too weak, but they realized that Lin Sun was really too strong. There were all kinds of rumors about Lin Sun in the outside world, but after all, they were just rumors, and they were not as shocking as seeing it with their own eyes. The dean should be right. Lin Sun, he must have set foot on the strongest path of cultivation since ancient times. A very senior instructor sighed with emotion. A few days ago, when the news that Lin Sun had killed 6 practitioners of the reincarnation developing realm came out, the dean of Green Deer Academy was also shocked, and he only made one comment. This lad has transcended his peers and set foot on the peak, like a king. He can be said to be invincible in the Paradise Realm. Now witnessing this scene, these instructors finally realized what was called the path to the peak, and what was called the king of the realm. No matter how outstanding one's talent was, how amazing the secret method he mastered, and how extraordinary his background was, he was doomed to be vulnerable in front of a king. Is he toying with those fellows? An instructor had a strange expression on his face. From the moment Lin Sun made his move until now, 5 successors of the heaven's pivot holy ground had already fallen to the ground. Each of them had been sent flying with a single kick, and their butts blossomed. If this wasn't teasing, then what was? And to be able to do this, it was really not easy. After all, it was easy to kick an expert's butt, but it was too difficult to do it repeatedly. But it just so happened that Lin Sun had done it with ease. This showed how terrifying Lin Sun's current strength was. Do you really want to become enemies with our heaven's pivot holy ground? On the high platform, Nangong Hua's expression was cold and ashen. Now that there was only one person left, when he faced Lin Sun, he was furious, but he couldn't help but feel anxious. In particular, his companions beside him were all kicked until their butts blossomed, and they lay on the ground in an embarrassing posture. This made Nangong Hua shudder. He was afraid that he would follow in their footsteps. That would be even worse than killing him. Threat. Lin Sun took a step forward. This step was very casual, but Nangong Hua reflexively tightened his legs, and his hands subconsciously protected his buttocks. The entire audience immediately roared with laughter. Previously, this fellow's entire body was golden and dazzling like the sun. How proud and arrogant was he! But now, he was so scared that he tightened his legs and used his hands to protect his buttocks. This contrast was too comical. Lin Sun also laughed, a very playful laugh. Nangong Hua had already sensed that something was wrong. His handsome face flushed red, and he was so angry that his teeth almost shattered. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never experienced such humiliation. You're going too far. Nangong Hua was completely enraged. He lost his mind and let out a furious roar, wanting to fight Lin Sun to the death. You're the only one left. Lin Sun was waiting for this moment, and he also attacked without hesitation. Stop! But at this moment, a loud shout filled with majesty resounded. Along with the voice, a figure flashed from outside the martial arts practice field. It was a purple-clothed, gray-haired old man. As soon as he appeared, he was recognized by many instructors. He was a great figure from the heavens' pivot holy land. This caused the expressions of many people to change. They realized that the matter was getting out of hand. Even the great figures of the heavens' pivot holy land were alarmed and wanted to stop all of this. At this time, the furious Nangong Hua secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He realized that he was finally saved. He didn't need to risk his life against the monster-like fellow in front of him, nor did he need to suffer the humiliation of having his buttocks blossom. Bang! But what made Nangong Hua's eyes almost pop out of their sockets, and his soul almost left his body, was that Lin Sun actually did not care and continued to attack. In an instant, Nangong Hua felt a pain in his buttocks, and his body flew uncontrollably. Damn it! The scene that he was most unwilling to accept still happened. This caused Nangong Hua to be so angry that his vision turned black. His heart collapsed, and before he could even fall to the ground, he fainted. Brat, you're courting death. The purple-robed, gray-haired old man had already arrived. Seeing this scene, his face became extremely gloomy. His figure did not stop at all and directly charged towards Lin Sun. He was aggressive, like a dragon in the sky, possessing a monstrous power. With a palm strike, tens of thousands of Dao runes appeared, enveloping Lin Sun. At this moment, the entire audience was shocked, and the expressions of all the teachers and students changed. Everything happened too fast. No one thought that Lin Sun would actually disregard everything and attack Nangong Hua. Similarly, no one thought that the big shot of the heavens' pivot holy land would be so decisive. As soon as he arrived, he directly attacked Lin Sun. It was too late to stop him. Boom! On the high platform, Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed as he felt an unprecedented pressure. However, he was not afraid. At this moment, the heavenly cave in his body was operating at full strength, rumbling and surging with divine splendor. The essence, chi and spirit of his body were pushed to the extreme, causing his body to shine brilliantly, flowing with an illusory light green halo. His aura was like a dragon that had been dormant in the abyss for a long time, soaring into the sky. Boom! An ancient handprint condensed from Lin Sun's palm, as if it was carved out of green flawless jade. It had a vast and majestic aura and majesty. Taoist handprint. The next moment, the deafening sound of collision resounded, shaking every inch of the martial arts arena. The terrifying aftermath swept across, plowing cracks on the ground. The nearby buildings all collapsed and burst into pieces at this moment. Debris flew everywhere, and smoke and dust filled the air. Some of the weaker students were so shocked that their faces turned pale, and they almost coughed up blood. Fortunately, they were protected by some teachers in time. Otherwise, they would have suffered a more serious blow. The power of a single blow was so terrifying. In the midst of the smoke and dust, Lin Sun's figure swayed, and he uncontrollably took a few steps back. Every step he took, the ground shook once, making a cracking sound. After taking 3 steps back, the ground had already cracked into countless fine cracks like spider webs, spreading in all directions. At this time, Lin Sun's face was only slightly pale, and his black eyes were steaming with the fighting spirit like lava. It seemed that not only was he not injured, but his momentum and fighting spirit were even more intense and strong. Looking at the opposite side, the purple-robed gray-haired old man also swayed, but he didn't retreat. Obviously, he had the upper hand in this blow. However, his face became more and more livid and gloomy, even with a hint of surprise. Obviously, he didn't expect that such a young man in Tao Insight Realm could block his angry blow. All the teachers and students in the field were stunned. The purple-robed gray-haired old man was a big shot in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, but Lin Sun could block his blow. This was too shocking. No one would believe it if it was spread out. No wonder you dare to be so rampant. Turns out that you have something to rely on. Then take another blow from me. The purple-robed gray-haired old man's face was gloomy, and his eyes were filled with cold light. As he spoke, his figure flashed and he rushed out again. Having his attack blocked by a junior obviously caused him to feel slightly embarrassed, and when he attacked this time, the might he displayed was completely different from before. Chapter 689. This was a top figure in the reincarnation developing realm. Lin Sun made a prediction in his heart. He had killed 6 practitioners in the reincarnation developing realm, including Qin Xuandu and Zhuo Baoying, so he had some understanding of the power of this realm. Therefore, Lin Sun realized that the purple-robed gray-haired old man was not simple. He was a top figure in the reincarnation developing realm. This was not the most terrible thing. The most terrible thing was that the power of the purple-robed gray-haired old man was complete, far beyond Qin Xuandu and others. This was the influence of the incomplete Tao. Qin Xuandu and others achieved the reincarnation developing realm in the mortal world, which was enough to show disdain in the Xiao Empire. But in the eyes of the real big shots, their Tao had obvious defects, and they were obviously inferior to the practitioners in the reincarnation developing realm who had a complete Tao. Lin Sun didn't understand this before. It was the various experiences in the depths of the soul oblivion sea that made him complete his Tao and set foot on the absolute Tao. Only then did he deeply realize how great the impact of the incomplete Tao on practitioners was. It was no wonder that all the talents of the younger generation who had their own pursuit would leave resolutely and go to the ancient desolation territory for cultivation. What they pursued was a complete Tao that was different from the mortal world. This was undoubtedly the most important point. It was also the fundamental reason why the purple-robed gray-haired old man was so powerful that Qin Xuandu and others could not compare with him. Boom! Before Lin Sun had time to think, the purple-robed gray-haired old man had launched the second attack, and his momentum was getting stronger. "I'd like to see if you can force me to use my ultimate strength," Lin soon took a deep breath and ran the mystery of the saint method in his heart, which made him burn with fighting intent. Since returning to the Forbidden City from the Soul Oblivion Sea, Lin soon hadn't met a worthy opponent. Now the purple-robed old man made him not afraid but expectant. However, before the two could fight again, a figure suddenly came to the field and stood in front of the purple-robed old man. "Xian Xing, we are here as guests, not to fight and kill. You can leave now." This was an extremely young man in a dark green robe. His eyes were as pure and clean as a baby's eyes, but there were some wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, which added a sense of vicissitudes to him. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his demeanor was calm and leisurely, but there was a great majesty about him. It gave people a feeling of insignificance as if they were looking up at a tall mountain. No one noticed how he had appeared, but the moment he appeared, he became the focus of everyone's attention. Even Lin Sun's pupils constricted at this moment, and a heavy pressure arose in his heart. Undoubtedly, this was a life-and-death realm king. The entire scene was deathly silent. Only the young man stood there. His back was like a mountain that seemed to be able to support the heavens and the earth, mighty and unshakable. The purple-robed old man called Xian Xing also had a complicated expression on his face. He wanted to say something but hesitated. Finally, he retreated to the side silently. This scene showed the young man's extraordinary background even more clearly. He was the elder of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, Yu Xiu, an old monster of the life and death realm who was famous even in the ancient desolation realms. "Take them and leave this place first," Yu Xiu ordered casually. Xian Xing hesitated, anger and resentment still lingered in his heart. "Elder, just now, I saw everything just now. You are not as good as others, but you still want to provoke us. It doesn't matter if you are taught a lesson. Are the successors of our Heaven's Pivot Holy Land a sore loser?" Yu Xiu's voice was calm, but it made Xian Xing's face change suddenly. Feeling the terrible pressure, he did not dare to hesitate any longer and hurried away with Nangong Hua and others. Wush, seeing this, all the teachers and students present breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Yu Xiu with a hint of admiration. Perhaps this was the true style of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land? "Lin Sun, I've heard of you. Even your dean praised you." Yu Xiu smiled and looked at Lin Sun, "and what I saw just now makes me more convinced that you are really as extraordinary as the rumors say. How about it, are you interested in going to the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land to cultivate?" The audience suddenly became restless, all of them were shocked and excited. Who could have imagined that after Lin Sun had just beaten up the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the big shots of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land would ignore this and take the initiative to invite Lin Sun to cultivate in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land? It was so unexpected. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but be slightly stunned. "You can be at ease. What happened today will definitely not affect your cultivation in the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Land. Moreover, with the potential and foundation you possess, I believe that only by cultivating in the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Land will you not be buried." The appreciation on Yu Xiu's face was undisguised and quite sincere. Although he looked young, he was an old monster of the life and death realm. It was indeed surprising that he would take the initiative to recruit a younger generation. All the teachers and students present were very excited and also very emotional. Perhaps only a person like Instructor Shaolin could make a life and death realm king treat him with such respect. If it was any other cultivator, they probably wouldn't even think about agreeing to such an invitation. After all, this was a rare opportunity. If he could enter the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land to cultivate from this lower realm, it would be no different from reaching the heavens in a single step. But Lin Sun was thinking. It wasn't that he wasn't tempted. In his plan, he had originally planned to go to the ancient desolation territory to cultivate after arranging everything. The reason why he hesitated was that he had many things to solve at present, so it was impossible for him to agree at once. Yushio looked at Lin Sun quietly without any displeasure. He appreciated Lin Sun very much. When he saw Lin Sun with his own eyes, he even felt a little surprised and happy, as if he had picked up a treasure. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that Lin Sun must have set foot on the absolute way. Even in the ancient desolation territory, such a peerless genius was a good seedling that all the sects scrambled for. But Lin Sun could set foot on the absolute way in this lower realm, where the great way was incomplete. It could be imagined how amazing his potential and talent were. Such a talent was worthy of his attention. However, before Lin Sun could think it over, a clear voice rang out abruptly. "Senior, there are some things you probably don't understand. If you do, you will not make such a decision in a hurry." All the people present frowned. Who was so bold to speak at this moment? And it was obvious that he wanted to stop Lin Sun from entering the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. The gazes of everyone looked over in unison, and they saw a handsome and outstanding young man who wore a bright yellow dragon robe and a violet gold crown on his head walking over. "Ninth Prince!" Someone cried out involuntarily, shocking everyone present. They recognized the newcomer's identity. Ninth Prince Zhao Jingzhen. He was the son of the current great emperor. His identity was so noble that everyone in Xiao Empire had to show him some respect. But why was he here? Why did he intervene in this matter? All the teachers and students present had a bad feeling. They sensed that the sudden arrival of the ninth prince seemed to be disadvantageous to Lin Sun. Lin Sun frowned. He also learned Zhao Jingzhen's identity from the discussion. However, he was quite puzzled. He had never seen this guy before. He didn't even know him. Why did this guy appear at this time? "What do you mean?" Yu Xiu also frowned, a trace of displeasure flashing through his eyes. As an elder of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land and a life and death king from the ancient desolation domain, he naturally wouldn't care about the identity of a young prince. However, Zhao Jingzhen respectfully bowed toward Yu Xiu and said, "Senior, please don't think too much. Junior didn't come here to spoil Senior's business on purpose. I just want to tell Senior some truths." "Truths?" Everyone was puzzled. Lin Sun frowned but didn't say anything in the end. He wanted to see what tricks this ninth prince had up his sleeves. "Speak." Yu Xiu suppressed the displeasure in his heart. Zhao Jingzhen faintly smiled and said with a calm expression, "Senior, you probably don't know, but not long ago, a descendant of the Spirit Treasure Holy Land died in Lin Sun's hands. Because of this, Lin Sun has become the enemy of the Spirit Treasure Holy Land. Sooner or later, he will be captured and killed to atone for his crime." All the teachers and students sucked in a breath of cold air. They truly didn't know that Lin Sun had done such a thing. This was too frightening. Being hated by the Spirit Treasure Holy Land. Just thinking about it made their scalps go numb. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and his gaze toward Zhao Jingzhen was somewhat cold. The matter of him killing Gong Yangyu happened in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea. How did this guy know? Unless the descendant of the Spirit Treasure Holy Land told him personally. And under normal circumstances, who would take the initiative to tell such a shameful matter? However, Zhao Jingzhen was able to understand that there was probably some sort of connection between him and the numinous treasure Holy Land. Is this true? Yu Xiu was also somewhat surprised and couldn't help but ask Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and frankly admitted it. This matter could no longer be concealed. Even if he didn't admit it, Zhao Jingzhen would certainly take out some evidence to prove it. In other words, in Lin Sun's view, since Zhao Jingzhen wanted to reveal this matter this time, he must have come prepared. Yu Xiu sank into deep thought. All the teachers and students present were a little frightened. They had also realized that the ninth prince Zhao Jingzhen was obviously here to harm Lin Sun, to destroy his chance to join the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. "Senior, I know that the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land and the Spirit Treasure Holy Land are the two major orthodoxies in the ancient desolation territory, and we have always had a good relationship. If you accept Lin Sun, then how will the spirit treasure Holy Land feel? Zhao Jingzhen still looked calm and spoke with fervor and assurance, neither humble nor pushy, appearing very calm. From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Lin Sun. But the more he behaved like this, the more chilling it was. Those who came with ill intentions, and those who came with good intentions didn't come. Why on earth did Zhao Jingzhen target Lin Sun like this? Lin Sun was also very puzzled. He had a good relationship with Zhao Jingxian and Zhao Tailai, and even the current emperor and empress had secretly taken care of him. Under such circumstances, the ninth prince Zhao Jingzhen jumped out to attack him, which was a little unexpected for Lin Sun. How can you understand the matters between our two orthodoxies? If you want to change my attitude just because of this, then that's too laughable. Yu Xiu snorted coldly, looking at Zhao Jingzhen with cold and repulsion. But Zhao Jingxian didn't care at all. He said with a respectful smile, "Senior, don't worry. The truth is certainly more than this." What did this mean? Was there something more terrible about Lin Sun than killing the successor of the spirit treasure Holy Land? All the people present were shocked and doubtful. Chapter 690. Lin Sun looked at him coldly. Zhao Jingzhen's behavior made him feel that something was wrong. Say it. Yu Xiu was expressionless. His smile was gone, and there was a trace of impatience in his eyes. A prince from the inferior world had jumped out to stop him from recruiting a genius who had embarked on the peerless cultivation path. No matter what the reason was, it had violated his taboo. If it weren't for his feelings, he would have slapped Lin Sun away. Zhao Jingzhen also seemed to notice Yu Xiu's impatience, so he immediately said bluntly, "Senior, you should have heard of Yun Qi Bai, right?" Yun Qi Bai. Lin Sun was shocked, and an imperceptible cold light flashed in his black eyes. He vaguely knew what Zhao Jingzhen was going to say. Yu Xiu was obviously moved. Yun Qi Bai? The successor of the heaven-reaching sword sect? Yes, it's Senior Yun Qi Bai, who is known as the first sword practitioner in the ancient Desolation territory. Zhao Jingzhen's expression was a little secretive. "Senior, do you know that Lin Sun is the enemy of Yunqing Senior Bai?" "What?" Yu Xiu was also a little surprised at this moment. Yun Qi Bai was the most dazzling legendary sword practitioner in the ancient Desolation territory. Since his debut, he had been invincible in the world. Now, he was regarded as the unparalleled first sword practitioner below the life and death realm. Even Yu Xiu had to admit that Yun Qi Bai was indeed a rare peerless figure. He was born with the luck of heaven and earth, and his aptitude was so outstanding that almost no one could compare with him. However, Yu Xiu didn't expect that a figure like Yun Qi Bai would have a grudge against a young man from the inferior world. It was too bizarre. He looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun was silent for a moment. Then he calmly faced Qin Shi and Yu Xiu's eyes and said, "It's true. What the hell is going on?" Yu Xiu frowned and stared at Zhao Jingzhen. All the teachers and students present were also surprised and confused. They couldn't understand, but they noticed that Yu Xiu, the life and death realm, seemed to attach great importance to the so-called Yun Qi Bai. More than 10 years ago, Senior Yun Qi Bai came to the inferior world. Zhao Jingzhen spoke quickly. He narrated the bloody incident that happened on Heart-Cleansing Peak, but he didn't tell the truth. Hearing all this, many teachers and students present changed their faces. They never expected that such a thing had happened in Heart-Cleansing Peak. On the other hand, some of the older instructors sighed inwardly. They had also heard of the bloody incident from more than 10 years ago. Yu Xiu pondered for a long time before he looked at Lin Sun with a strange look. "Is it true?" Lin Sun looked extremely calm at this moment and said, "Yes, there is nothing to hide. Yun Qi Bai killed all the lineal relatives of Lin family, including my parents." Zhao Jingzhen was stunned. He didn't expect that Lin Sun would take the initiative to admit it and be so calm, which made him a little uncomfortable. "What's the reason?" Yu Xiu frowned. Yes, I also want to know the reason. Lin Sun calmly looked at Zhao Jingzhen in the distance. I don't know either. Zhao Jingzhen shook his head. However, I believe that Senior Yunqing Bai must have his reasons for doing so. Otherwise, with his status and identity, why would he kill someone for no reason? This was tantamount to exonerating Yun Qin Bai. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly became cold. So, you think everything Yun Qi Bai does is right, and those relatives of Lin family deserve to die? His voice was cold with a touch of killing intent. Zhao Jingzhen's face changed slightly, and then he snorted coldly. I didn't say that. There must be a reason for everything. Can you guarantee that those relatives of yours died unjustly? At this moment, everyone noticed that there was an unprecedented killing intent in Lin Sun. His whole body was like a volcano that was about to erupt, which made people tremble. The atmosphere was so stifling that it was hard to breathe. But before long, Lin Sun restrained all his breath, looked at Zhao Jingzhen indifferently, and said, You'd better remember what you said today. Zhao Jingzhen's heart trembled, but he snorted coldly, As a prince of the empire, I should be responsible for what I said. Lin Sun didn't say anything more, and his face became calmer. There was no need to guess at all. Everyone knew that Zhao Jingzhen's behavior had completely angered Lin Sun. Senior, this is the truth I want to tell you. Zhao Jingzhen cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said. He glanced at Lin Sun with a smile that seemed to be a little disdainful. Yu Xiu fell into silence. A holy land of spiritual treasure might not be able to make him feel any pressure, but Yun Qingbai appeared out of nowhere, which made him have to think carefully. After all, Yun Qingbai was too dazzling and peerless. Sooner or later, he would set foot on the life and death realm, and his achievements would be limitless. Moreover, behind him was the heaven-reaching sword sect, which was also a giant in the ancient Desolation territory, not inferior to the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. If Lin Sun put pressure on Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure, Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect, and Yun Qi Bai, the price would be a little heavy. Even Yu Xiu had to consider the consequences. All the teachers and students present felt cold in their hearts and were extremely angry. How could they not see that Yu Xiu, who had admired Lin Sun a moment ago, had changed his attitude quietly? Because of this, Lin Sun would even lose an opportunity to cultivate in the ancient orthodoxy in the ancient Desolation territory. Such an opportunity was enough for a practitioner in the mortal world to rise to the top in a single step. But now, it seemed to have become uncertain, and all this was because of Zhao Jingzhen. How could those teachers and students not be angry? On the other hand, Zhao Jingzhen raised the corners of his mouth into a complacent smile. He was calm and composed, not afraid of being stared at by so many people. He even sighed and said to Lin Sun with his fists cupped, I'm sorry, but as a prince of the empire, there are some truths that must be told. Otherwise, if one day the seniors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land are implicated because of you, who will bear the consequences? Disgusting. Many students cursed in their hearts. It was too disgusting. A prince of the empire was acting like he was thinking for the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land at this time. It was too hypocritical. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun also opened his mouth and looked at Zhao Jingzhen calmly. You came here to stop me from entering the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Unfortunately, you are wrong about one thing. Since you dared to kill the descendant of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure, do you think I will still care about a chance to enter the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land for cultivation? Although these words were a little harsh to Yu Xiu, as long as he thought about it, he knew that Lin Sun would be able to cultivate in the ancient Desolation territory sooner or later with his foundation and potential. As for whether to enter the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land or not, it was not a pity for a genius like him. But the more it was like this, the more Yu Xiu hated Zhao Jingzhen. If Zhao Jingzhen hadn't suddenly interrupted, how could things have come to this point? All of a sudden, he looked at Zhao Jingzhen with a trace of sullen and dissatisfaction. Zhao Jingzhen's face changed slightly. What happened today made him quite proud. He thought that he had completely ruined Lin Sun's chance to make a meteoric rise. Who would have thought that Lin Sun didn't care at all from beginning to end? This made him feel a little empty and depressed. What made his scalp numb was that even Yu Xiu, the elder of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, seemed to have a problem with him. My young friend, if Yu Xiu took a deep breath and opened his mouth. He intended to recruit Lin Sun again. It would be a pity if a genius like Lin Sun gave up just because of some reasons and pressure. However, before he finished his words, a burst of hearty laughter sounded. My fellow practitioner, this matter seems to be a little troublesome. Why don't you think about it before making a decision? Accompanied by laughter, a thin figure appeared. His appearance was simple and unsophisticated, and he didn't look very conspicuous. However, when he appeared, whether it was the teachers and students present, Lin Sun or Zhao Jingzhen, all of them bowed in unison. Dean. Obviously, this thin old man was the dean of Green Deer School. Alas, that's the only way. Yu Xiu sighed, feeling quite depressed. No one can guess whether it's a blessing or a curse. What's more, if other people in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land know this, they will definitely think twice before taking action. The dean's words were plain, but he was reminding Yu Xiu that this decision was not easy to make. If he insisted on doing it, he might suffer a lot of criticism. This surprised all the teachers and students present. It seemed that the dean also did not want Lin Sun to join the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Forget it, let's talk about this later. Yu Xiu shook his head and left in disappointment. Lin Sun, if you have a chance in the future, you should come back to Green Deer School more often. After all, you are a teacher of our school. I don't want a talent like you to be poached away by others. The dean took a deep look at Lin Sun, and then floated away. He came and went quickly, but his appearance was thought-provoking. Zhao Jingzhen was stunned. He also could not see through the dean, and he felt that there was something strange about today's matter. Looks like the principal saw everything that happened earlier, Yi Zichen muttered. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Soon, Zhao Jingzhen could not stay any longer, because he noticed that all the teachers and students present were staring at him unkindly, with hatred, disgust, and rejection. No matter how shrewd he was, he could not stand it, so he turned around and left. However, as soon as he walked out of the martial arts practice field, he was stopped by a figure. Ninth Prince, the role you played today is really surprising. Not simple at all. Uncle? Why are you here? Zhao Jingzhen's face changed, and he lost his composure on the spot. At this time, Lin Sun was also a little surprised. The figure who stopped Zhao Jingzhen was actually Zhao Tailai, who seemed to have disappeared these days. If I didn't come, Ninth Prince, I'm afraid you would poke a hole in the sky. Zhao Tailai's expression was very cold. As he spoke, he waved his hand. Someone, take the Ninth Prince back to the palace. Be sure to serve him well. If there is any accident on the way, I will punish you. Immediately, a group of dignified figures in black came forward silently, surrounded the Ninth Prince, and forcibly took him away. Uncle, what do you mean by this? Who told you to bring the Praetorian Guards here? What the hell is going on? The Ninth Prince was completely panicked, struggling and shouting. But in the end, Zhao Tailai did not pay attention to him, and Zhao Jingzhen was stuffed into a treasure carriage that had been prepared and taken away in a hurry. In the martial arts practice field, all the teachers and students were in a daze, and they could not turn their head. Too many things had happened today, one after another, and big shots had appeared one after another. Until now, even the Ninth Prince, Zhao Jingzhen, had been taken away. As long as one was not stupid, anyone could guess that there were too many secrets and mysteries hidden in it. Can you give me an explanation this time? Lin Sun stepped forward, looked at Zhao Tailai, and asked directly. Chapter 691. More than 10 years ago, Yun Qingbai came to the mortal world alone because he heard that a baby was born in the mortal world. The biggest difference between this baby and other babies is that he was born with a kind of spiritual vein, which can be ranked as the top talent attribute. You should have guessed it. This kind of spiritual vein is called the devouring abyss. A carriage slowly drove out of Green Deer School. On the carriage, Zhao Tailai's voice was low and gentle as he talked about the past. Next to him, Lin Sun listened silently. The competition of the Great Tao is crueler than anything in the world, especially for practitioners. In order to achieve higher achievements on the road of the Great Tao, there is almost nothing they can't do. Yun Qi Bai was originally a supreme genius. His talent, potential, intelligence, and aptitude could be said to be the best in the world. Even in the ancient times, a figure like him was extremely rare, and he could be called a dragon amongst men, a figure that reigned supreme over all. However, compared with some holy sons, spiritual bodies, and some divine sons with more terrible origins in the antiquity times, he was slightly inferior. Originally, this was not a big deal, but Yun Qingbai was a person who pursued the ultimate perfect Great Tao. He couldn't tolerate this flaw in himself, so Lin Sun, who had been silent, said, "So, he set his eyes on me." Zhao Tailai stared at Lin Sun for a moment and found that there was no fluctuation in his expression and mood. Then he said, "Yes. The great devouring abyss is a mysterious and terrifying innate attribute even in ancient times. It rarely appears, and there are very few records and descriptions of it. But in legends, this kind of innate talent is something that even the true divine sons and holy sons would be jealous of." A wisp of a complicated expression appeared on Zhao Tailai's face. On the other hand, if Yun Qingbai is able to obtain such natural talent and use it for himself, then he would undoubtedly be able to make up for his final flaw and attain the most perfect path towards the Tao in history. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and his expression was terrifyingly calm. He said, "So, he can seize other people's talent for his own sake?" Zhao Tailai smiled bitterly. This is the horror of the competition of the Great Tao. In the case of no enmity, unexpected disasters will be caused for some reason. All of this is because you were born with a talent that was simply too heaven-defying and rare. Lin Sun said expressionlessly, "Senior, you are wrong. The reason is not my talent, but Yun Qi Bai. For the sake of the so-called perfect Great Tao, this person harmed me and even cruelly killed my Lin family's direct descendants. Even if a bastard like this can reach the peak of the Great Tao, he is nothing more than a despicable person." He paused for a moment, and then a wisp of coldness flashed through his eyes. "One day, I'll make this despicable bastard pay an unbearable price." The anger and hatred in his heart were almost uncontrollable. Only now did he find out that the death of his parents all those years ago was actually because of him, and this caused him to hate Yun Qingbai even more. For the sake of his own selfishness, he had done despicable and bloody things. Even if this kind of person was cut into 1,000 pieces and turned into ashes, it would be letting him off lightly. Lin Sun, Zhao Tailai looked dignified. "You must not act on impulse. Yun Qingbai may be despicable and shameless, but now he has already become the most dazzling figure in the ancient wilderness. He is known as the first sword practitioner in ancient times, invincible under the King realm, and has the backing of the Heavenly Master Sword sect." Before he finished speaking, Lin Sun interrupted him, "Senior, don't worry. I have waited for so many years, and I am not in a hurry. By the way, let's talk about the ninth prince." Lin Sun changed the topic and didn't want to talk about it anymore. Zhao Tailai also knew that although Lin Sun looked calm at the moment, he was suppressing some kind of deep-rooted hatred and anger in his heart. "The ninth prince," a sneer appeared at the corner of Zhao Tailai's mouth. "He is just a pitiful person who was used by others." Then Zhao Tailai told some of the reasons to Lin Sun. It turned out that the mother of the ninth prince, Meng Rong, was a concubine of the great. She was the daughter of an elder in the Heavenly Master Sword sect. The reason why Yun Qinbai knew that there was a baby with the talent of devouring the abyss in the Lin family was that this concubine tipped him off. When the great emperor learned of this, it was too late. It was too late to save it. Because of this, the great emperor was furious and abolished the concubine, accusing her of colluding with outsiders and harming the loyal officials of the empire. However, due to the power of the Heavenly Master Sword sect, the great emperor could only do this. Meng Rong was finally taken away by her father, the elder of the Heavenly Master Sword sect. They left the empire and went to the ancient wilderness. As for the 9th prince, he was also given the cold shoulder by the current great emperor. This caused him to accumulate a bellyful of resentment. He had been secretly contacting his mother, Meng Rong. As a prince, he could not go against the great emperor's authority, so he bore all of this hatred on the Lin clan. When Lin Sun learned all this, he finally understood why Zhao Jingzhen suddenly jumped out today and stopped him from joining the Tianshu holy ground. Do you remember the killing you encountered on the way when you first entered the Forbidden City? Zhao Tailai suddenly said. You mean the Qi family? Lin Sun frowned. Yes. Zhao Tailai sighed. There is no big hatred between the Qi family and your Lin family. The reason why they did this was that they were bewitched by the 9th prince. How could a neglected prince order the Qi family? Lin Sun was a little puzzled. If it was only him, of course, he wouldn't have such great ability. But don't forget that the 9th prince's mother is from the ancient wilderness. His grandfather is an elder of the Heavenly Master Sword sect. Zhao Tailai explained patiently. In these years, many clansmen of the Qi family have been sent to the Heavenly Master Sword sect for cultivation. In order to get some care from the 9th prince's grandfather, they naturally have to treat the 9th prince well. No wonder Lin Sun completely understood. If Zhao Tailai didn't tell him all this in person, he couldn't imagine that there were so many secrets and mysteries in it. What's the name of his grandfather? Lin Sun asked suddenly. Zhao Tailai was stunned. Do you still want to find him? Lin Sun said calmly. Only by finding him can we find the 9th prince's mother, Meng Rong. Zhao Tailai's heart trembled inexplicably. He realized that Lin Sun obviously didn't intend to let go of any of the enemies related to the blood feud of the Lin family. But when he thought about it carefully, if it wasn't for Meng Rong informing him, then how could an expert of the ancient desolation region like Yun Qinbai possibly know that an infant that possessed the heaven-devouring abyss would actually be born in the lower dimensions? Zhao Tailai sighed softly and said the name of the elder of the Heavenly Master Sword sect, Meng Haijing. Seniors, how will you deal with the 9th prince? Lin Sun asked. Zhao Tailai seemed very relaxed this time and said, either he will be executed, or he will live a life worse than death. This made Lin Sun feel surprised. He was not merciful, but he knew very well that as a prince of the empire and a descendant of the current emperor, if the 9th prince was executed, it would definitely cause a shock in the empire. In order to give him an explanation, the emperor could order to kill a son. This obviously didn't make sense. Lin Sun didn't believe that he had such great influence. Back then, his mother broke the emperor's heart. And now, he is the same as his mother, choosing the wrong path and doing some unforgivable things. If we don't punish him, the Empress will never forgive him. The Empress? Zhao Tailai looked at Lin Sun with a mysterious smile and said, yes, the 9th prince is not the Empress's son, but you are the Empress's daughters only. Good friend. He deliberately emphasized the words, good friend, with a playful and ambiguous look, which made Lin Sun feel a headache. Under such circumstances, the Empress will naturally help you seek an explanation. Zhao Tailai took a deep breath and said, of course, the most fundamental thing is that the 9th prince's actions have violated the emperor's taboo and bottom line. Even if it's a father-son relationship, it can't be forgiven. There was a touch of coldness in his eyes. Sure enough, I know I don't have such great influence. Lin Sun touched his nose. Zhao Tailai couldn't help but roll his eyes. Go back and prepare well. 3 days later, I'll take you to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Before sending Lin Sun back to Heart-Cleansing Peak, Zhao Tailai told him his purpose. Is it because of the meal in the star-hugging moon residence? Lin Sun asked the reason. Zhao Tailai looked unprecedentedly serious. No, it's because you are a trainee of the bloodthirsty camp. Only when you get there can you understand the real meaning of that sentence. What sentence? Xiao Flower is invincible because of bloodthirsty, and the Empire is everlasting because of war. Good. On the afternoon of Lin Sun's return to Heart-Cleansing Peak, news came from the Imperial Palace that the 9th Prince Zhao Jingjin was deposed and escorted to the forbidden area deep in the Imperial Palace to guard the tombs of the Imperial ancestors until he died of old age. As soon as the news came out, the Forbidden City was in turmoil and the world was shocked. It was the first time that a prince was deposed in the Empire for so many years. What kind of disaster did the 9th Prince commit to make the Emperor so angry? No one knew. Even those teachers and students who had seen Zhao Jingjin for the last time in Green Deer School found it difficult to associate the deposed of the 9th Prince with Lin Sun. After all, although Zhao Jingjin had offended Lin Sun, in everyone's opinion, it was not enough to make the Emperor so angry. Only Lin Sun knew the truth, but he wouldn't say much. But when Lin Sun learned the news, he couldn't help but sigh that the 9th Prince was just a poor guy, as Zhao Tailai said 3 days later. Zhao Tailai arrived as scheduled. Lin Sun, who had been ready, said goodbye to the people of Heart-Cleansing Peak and left with Zhao Tailai. Bloodthirsty battlefield. What was this place? Lin Sun kept thinking on the way. Chapter 692. Have you arranged everything? Zhao Tailai asked on the way. Lin Sun nodded. This time, he left with only 2 treasures, a bow and a broken sword. In addition, he also had a luggage. The bag contained a large number of high-level spiritual crystals and some precious spiritual medicines needed for healing. Apart from this, there was nothing else. Wordless pagoda, universe ring, spirit refining gourd with a drop of purple blood, and some rare spiritual materials were left in Heart-Cleansing Peak. According to Zhao Tailai, the bloodthirsty battlefield was located in an extremely special plane, where all storage treasures could not be used. The most important thing was that there was no spiritual power in the bloodthirsty battlefield. The bloodthirsty battlefield is the front line of the battle between the Empire and the Voodoo barbarian tribe. It is also a war barrier that has protected the Empire for thousands of years. Zhao Tailai gave a brief introduction. For thousands of years, most of the elites in the bloodthirsty camp of the Empire have been sent to the bloodthirsty battlefield for garrison and battle. In addition, the most elite troops of the Empire and many strong men are also stationed there all the year round. It is a turbulent, bloody, dark and murderous world. Over the past thousands of years, many strong men of the Empire have been buried in it. It can be said that the prosperity and peace of the Empire today are exchanged with the lives and blood of these strong men. It's just that few people know it. Lin Sun listened quietly, and he couldn't help but have a preliminary and vague impression of the bloodthirsty battlefield. Words can't describe the cruelty of the bloodthirsty battlefield. You will understand it when you get there. I only hope you remember that survival is equal to victory. And in order to survive, no matter what, I absolutely can't have a trace of luck in my heart. This is the war between the Empire and the Voodoo barbarian tribe, which has lasted for thousands of years. The hatred built with endless blood and bones can only be resolved by killing. Many young founding emperors once said that in the bloodthirsty battlefield, a trace of your kindness might cost the Empire a territory. Remember, you must survive. Speaking of this, Zhao Tailai handed a leather handbook to Lin. There are some introductions about the bloodthirsty battlefield in it. When you arrive at the battlefield camp, someone will also arrange tasks for you. Lin Sun took the handbook but didn't read it directly. He asked, "How long will it take this time?" "At least 3 months, at most half a year." Zhao Tailai muttered, I know you are eager to go to the ancient Desolation Realm. When you come back, I will help you find a way to the ancient Desolation Realm. Are you still wondering why you were chosen? Zhao Tailai suddenly asked. Lin Sun nodded honestly. It's very simple. This is the arrangement of the current emperor. As long as you make a brilliant military contribution there, the empire will justifiably give your Lin family the most comprehensive protection. Zhao Tailai looked serious. You will leave the ancient Desolation domain in the future. If Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak wants to live in peace for a long time, it needs the protection of the empire. You don't want anything bad to happen to Lin family after you leave, do you? Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said, That's a good reason. Zhao Tailai smiled, and the corners of his mouth curled up. You don't understand it well enough. What I mean is, if one day Yun Qinbai comes to the empire and wants to harm your Lin family, you don't have to worry about any accidents. Lin Sun was shocked and looked at Zhao Tailai. Zhao Tailai said, This is the promise of the emperor to you. Good. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and there was no more hesitation in his heart. When Lin Sun got out of the chariot, a strange ancient hall came into view. There was a sign hanging on the hall, Bloodthirsty Hall. In front of the hall stood a teleportation formation that gave off an ancient aura. Lin Sun was shocked. He stepped forward and stared at the transmission matrix carefully. After a long time, he said, Is it left from ancient times? Good eyesight. Zhao Tailai praised. You deserve to be the youngest grandmaster of spiritual tattoos in the empire. Lin Sun couldn't help rolling his eyes. As we all know, only sages who master the mystery of space can set up a transmission matrix across the void. I'm afraid there are no sages in the empire today. Besides, the transmission matrix is full of vicissitude. Anyone can see it. Zhao Tailai's eyes became a little strange. Who said there are no sages in the empire? Lin Sun was stunned. Yes. Zhao Tailai shook his head. I don't know, but you can't deny it. As he said, he waved his hand impatiently. Hurry up. It's relatively safe to enter the bloodthirsty battlefield before sunset. Once we enter the night, you will be in trouble. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and said, Senior, I don't want anything like the previous time to happen again during my absence. He was talking about the crisis of Heart-Cleansing Peak when he returned from the Soul Oblivion Sea. Zhao Tailai's answer was very domineering. Don't worry. As long as there is any trouble in Heart-Cleansing Peak, I will go to the Zhuo family and the Qin family in person. Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help laughing. He liked the answer that didn't answer the question. Lin Sun could even imagine that even if something happened on Heart-Cleansing Peak had nothing to do with Zhuo Qin, the Zhuo family and the Qin family would have to accept it. Buzz. Lin Sun didn't hesitate. He carried his saber, bow and luggage and stepped on the transmission matrix. With an obscure sound of roaring, he disappeared in a flash. Boy, you must play a big game. Otherwise, it's hard to pay back the meal of the solitary old man of star-holding Sleeping Moon, Zhao Tailai murmured, and then he left in a hurry. Deep in the palace, a man in white was sitting in front of the desk, writing with a brush. His back was straight and his posture was heroic. There was a kind of indescribable majestic bearing in him. The beauty of a dragon and phoenix was nothing more than this. Have you sent him away? The man in white asked without turning his head. In the hall, Zhao Tailai walked up and nodded. He just left. He should be able to get to the camp before sunset. The man in white made an O sound and picked up the word he had just finished writing. What do you think of this word? Zhao Tailai looked up and saw a line of big characters written on the wide Xian paper with the pattern of Xiao flower as the bottom. The voice of a young phoenix is clearer than that of an old phoenix. The characters were written with iron strokes and silver hooks. They were as powerful as a dragon. They penetrated through the back of the paper, and there was a kind of magnificent atmosphere which was as majestic as mountains and rivers, shocking people. Good writing. Zhao Tailai's eyes brightened. With his eyesight, he could see that this piece of writing was branded with the imprint of Emperor Tao belonging to the man in white. Bang! The man in white took out a purple gold jade seal and stamped it on the corner of this piece of writing. Then he handed it to Zhao Tailai and said, "Send it to the Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak later." Zhao Tailai sighed with emotion. This time, the boy can finally be completely relieved. The man in white smiled at once. It seems that he still can't fully believe the Empire's promise to him before. It's normal. After all, he didn't grow up in the Empire. According to Lu Boya's temper, he must not have told him about the Empire. When he was about to leave, Zhao Tailai couldn't help asking, "Brother, I still don't understand why you insist on sending him to the bloodthirsty battlefield?" The man in white sat back in his chair. Looking at the sky outside of the palace, his eyes as deep as the ocean, he sighed. For thousands of years, the territory of the Imperium has been suffering the devastation and destruction of the sorcerers, barbarians, and aliens. Every year, countless men of the Imperium die on the battlefield. Too many sacrifices and prices have been paid in exchange for the peace we have today. After a pause, he said word by word, "I want to completely change this pattern. This is the reason why I let Lin Sun go to the bloodthirsty battlefield." Zhao Tailai was shocked. "Brother, do you mean that Lin Sun has the ability to change this pattern?" The man in white shook his head. "It's just a glimmer of hope. But no matter what, hope is better than no hope." When Zhao Tailai left the palace, he still couldn't calm down. He was thinking about one question all the way. Didn't my brother overestimate Lin Sun by doing this? Could he change the pattern that had not changed for thousands of years by himself? Zhao Tailai couldn't think of the answer. Heart-Cleansing Peak. The voice of a young phoenix is clearer than that of an old phoenix. Vulture smiled when he saw this big calligraphy sent from the depths of the palace. Lin Zhongzi was so excited that he couldn't calm down. He recognized this handwriting because he had got such a piece of calligraphy in the past. But there were only 4 words in the content: White Horse Tanhua. From now on, Heart-Cleansing Peak will have no worries. Vulture sighed with emotion. Young Ku, Zhu Laosan, Red Eagle King, Lin Huiyuan and others also sighed with emotion. Lin family could have today's situation thanks to Lin Sun. Young Ku, remember to take good care of Xia Ji. Vulture suddenly ordered. Young Ku nodded and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Xia Ji is Lin Sun's favorite." He didn't say goodbye to Xia Ji in person this time. He was still a little upset when he left. Everyone was speechless. Xia Ji, a mysterious and incredible little girl, was still sleeping now. No one knew when she would wake up. In the wordless pagoda, Old Toad had also been meditating in seclusion. Bang! When his feet landed on the ground, a burst of smoke and dust suddenly filled the air. There was a pungent smell of blood mixed with the stench of decaying corpses. Lin Sun appeared in this strange world with a broken sword on his back, insignificance bow on his waist, and a bag in his hand. He looked around and saw that the world was gray, the fields were vast, and the mountains were undulating. Everywhere he looked, there was almost no grass, barren and dark. On the earth, rotten and broken bones were buried in the dust and gravel, and the air was filled with a bloody and rotten smell. The world here was gloomy, silent, and filled with an oppressive gray color. Whoosh! Lin Sun spat out a mouthful of turbid air. At the first time, he noticed that there was no vitality in the world here. It was full of blood and death. The most important thing was that there was no spiritual power here. Bloodthirsty battlefield. Let me see how cruel and bloody it is. Lin Sun's figure flashed like a rising ice dragon. He rushed down from the cliff where he was and rushed in the opposite direction of the setting sun in the distance. In the opposite direction of the setting sun, where the rising sun is the camp of our empire. This was the first sentence on the animal skin handbook given to Lin by Zhao Tailai. And the second sentence was, "The sky is forbidden. If you fly up there, you will be the target of all. Therefore, Lin soon chose to rush on the earth. Chapter 693. The world was dark. Sand and dust covered the dry and barren land. Decaying wreckage could be seen everywhere. Not even a blade of grass grew here. The whole world showed a gray hue. The bloody smell in the air was strong and pungent. Lin Sun's movements were leisurely and natural, like moving clouds and flowing water. He seemed to be integrated with the world. Like a spider patrolling its territory in a web, Lin Sun had a sense of precise and skillful control. This was a fighting posture. Under the seemingly leisurely appearance, there was vigilance and prudence that could be triggered at any moment. Everywhere outside the camp is a battlefield. Constant vigilance is the first prerequisite for survival. This was the third sentence in the Animal Skin Manual. The terrain here is complex and changeable, with undulating mountains and ravines. If you don't fly in the air, you should be most careful of ambushes and attack. There is no spiritual energy between heaven and earth. To maintain peak physical strength, you need to seize every spare moment to replenish the spiritual energy you need. The bloody smell and rotten smell are lingering for a long time, which proves that more than one bloody battle broke out in the area I passed recently. As he moved forward, Lin soon observed what he saw along the way, silently understanding this bloodthirsty battlefield full of horror in his own way. In his hand, he held a piece of high-grade spiritual crystal to replenish the spiritual energy he consumed on the way. Even if the consumption was insignificant, Lin soon knew that once a fierce battle broke out, a slight loss of physical strength could lead to the worst result. This was a kind of fighting instinct that was tempered in the bloodthirsty camp. In the gray sky ahead, there was suddenly a touch of blood, as dazzling as a light in the night. Lin soon moved forward carefully. Before long, he saw an area full of corpses. The ground was stained with blood, and the corpses were still dripping blood. There were practitioners in the imperial military uniforms, and there were also corpses of voodoo barbarians and aliens in strange shape. The smell of gunpowder remained in the air, which proved that the battle here had just ended. Lin Sun suddenly narrowed his eyes and saw that most of the corpses of the imperial practitioners were incomplete, with many signs of dissection. Some had their hearts dug out, some had their heads cut off, some had their eyes taken out, and some were directly split in half with no internal organs, leaving only the empty skin. There was even a corpse that had its tendons pulled out and its bones dug out, leaving behind only a pool of flesh and blood. The cruel and bloody scene made Lin soon feel nauseous. But in the end, he didn't say a word. After a moment of silence, he turned around and left. In this battle, the Xiozha of the Empire lost. The different parts of their corpses were taken away as spoils of war. Lin Sun came to a conclusion. The Animal Skin Handbook had explained that the military achievements in the bloodthirsty battlefield were stained with blood, and the military achievements came from those cruel and perverted spoils of war. Not only the voodoo barbarian alien, when the Empire's practitioners defeated them, they would also take away a part of the voodoo barbarian alien. This was military merit. Rumble. Not long after they continued forward, a crack in the void appeared in the sky, and one could see beams of light that were as dazzling as auroras flickering within it. It was extremely beautiful and dazzling, but Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. A crack in the void. Under that beautiful appearance was an extreme danger that could make even life and death realm warriors shiver. Once caught in it, there would be no chance of survival. Blood, darkness, chaos, violence. Even though Lin Sun's heart was as hard as iron, he still felt a little heavy. The bloodthirsty battlefield was a tragic scene like the end of the world. Blood and rotten smell were everywhere, but no vitality could be seen. A low moan of pain came from the wind looming, but it couldn't hide from Lin Sun's tremendous spiritual power. In an instant, Lin Sun disappeared. Thousands of meters away, in front of a low mound, a figure was crawling forward. It was a woman who was seriously injured, bleeding all over. Her legs were broken by some blunt instrument, and her flesh festered. She could only crawl on the ground with her hand. The dusty ground was smeared by her body, leaving a long blood-colored trail. Lin soon watched in silence, and finally caught up with her without saying a word. The woman seemed to be aware of Lin Soon's arrival. She turned back with difficulty, revealing a confused, painful, dusty, and blood-stained face. Her empty eye sockets were still dripping blood. No one knew when her eyeballs had been dug out, which made her look extremely ferocious and horrible. Lin Sun looked calm. He could see that this woman must have been very beautiful in the past. Her facial features were very distinctive. Although her skin was covered with dust, it couldn't hide her snow-white and crystal-clear skin. But now, her legs were festering, her eyes were dug out, and she was covered with dust and bloodstains. She was crawling on the ground, looking so helpless and painful as if she was dying. Suddenly, Lin Sun noticed that the woman's blood-stained fingers were trembling as she wrote something on the ground. He couldn't help but step forward to have a look. Boom! But at this moment, the woman's body suddenly exploded. A terrible force of destruction spread from the explosion of its body, mixed with minced flesh and blood, covering Lin Sun. Lin Sun sighed in his heart, as if he had already expected this scene. His figure flashed and disappeared, avoiding the destructive airflow in advance. How many years have I not seen such a greenhorn? Ha! Could it be that there are no strong warriors in the human empire who can fight against him? He is such an obvious bait. It's really disappointing that he can't see through such an obvious bait. Let's kill him as soon as possible. I want his eyes. I want his heart. His skin is good. I want it. Not far from the hill, there was a pile of decaying bones. But at this time, a group of figures rushed out of it. There were men and women, not much different from human beings. But in different places of their bodies there were mysterious totem tattoos. Some of them were as strong as mountains, and their thick arms were covered with khaki totems. Some of them were shrouded in mist, with water dripping from their bodies, and their eyes were as blue as water diamonds. Some of them were silver-white, with fine electric arcs flashing on their long hair, dazzling and dazzling, like the sons of thunder and lightning. There was no doubt that they were the strong barbarians of the Voodoo barbarian tribe. The Voodoo barbarian tribe was divided into 9 branches, namely gold, wood, water, fire, earth, thunder, light, dark, and ancient. As early as in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun had personally dissected the bodies of different Voodoo barbarians, so he knew them like the palm of his hand. He even found at a glance that 5 of the 8 strong barbarians were Voodoo barbarian strongman, which was equivalent to the sea spirit realm of the human race. 3 of them were Great Wizard, which was equivalent to the Tao Insight realm. Barbarian slave, barbarian soldier, strongman, great wizard, and spirit awakening were the cultivation realms of the Voodoo barbarian tribe, which corresponded to the 5 realms of martial realm, gang spirit, sea spirit, Tao insight, and reincarnation developing in the human race. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded and blocked Lin Sun, with a sense of ridicule and cruelty on their faces. It could be seen from their evil spirits and bloody smell that they were not ordinary people, and could be classified as ruthless characters. But Lin Sun turned a blind eye to it. He stood there, his eyes fixed on the place where the woman exploded. On the ground, he could vaguely see a line of messy, blood-colored handwriting written by the woman before her death. "I'm the bait and you're the fish. Why don't you escape?" It was not a cry for help, nor was it the last words before death. It was like the roar of a comrade in arms, full of anxiety and anger. But the deep concern made Lin Sun tremble all over. Somewhere in his heart seemed to be hit, and there was a kind of unspeakable hatred and depression. He thought of the woman's festering legs, bloody and empty eye sockets after her eyes were dug out, and the long bloody road on the ground was dragged by her body. Sure enough, she's a newbie who just arrived at the battlefield and was scared silly. Ha! Those strong barbarians roared with laughter. They did not belittle Lin Sun, but surrounded him all the way. All of them were cautious and vigilant, which was the combat quality of veterans who had been honed for a long time. "I just wanted to save you as much as possible, but I didn't expect that. Their cruelty was beyond my expectation," Lin Sun murmured. He took a deep breath and turned his head. His black eyes were cold and indifferent. "You all deserve to die. Do it." The leading barbarian smiled cruelly and waved his hand without any nonsense. Immediately they took action. Boom! A giant hammer made of animal bones fell from the sky, making a whining sound, smashing the void and covering Lin Sun's head. Puff! Lin Sun didn't even look at it. With a sweep of the broken blade in his hand, the giant hammer burst into pieces, and a bloody head was thrown into the air. The deceased was a grand wizard. Until he died, he still kept a ferocious smile on his face, but it had been frozen there. He was killed on the spot before he had time to react or even felt panic and helplessness. This strike was incredibly fast. Puff! At this time, Lin Sun had already taken a step forward. With a broken blade flowing with bright starlight, he started a massacre. It was not until the second Grand Wizard was killed that other strong barbarians realized what had happened. They shouted in shock and anger, and their faces changed greatly. From this, it could be seen how fast Lin Sun was and how terrible his killing power was. He could almost kill a head with one saber. Killing chickens and monkeys was nothing more than this. The third Grand Wizard saw the opportunity and retreated decisively. He had been through hundreds of bloody battles, so he was shrewd and alert. Naturally, he realized that the fish that was hooked this time was actually a tough one. Bang! Insignificant bow was pulled up by Lin Sun, and a spiritual arrow shot out silently. The escaping Grand Wizard was shot to death from thousands of meters away and fell to the ground with a loud crash. Suddenly, there were only 5 barbarian warriors in the sea spirit realm left in the field. However, at this moment, their faces were pale and their bodies were trembling. Crack! Lin Sun didn't talk nonsense. The broken sword rolled up a silver river of stars and cut off a lot of heads in a neat way, ending the battle that started suddenly and ended in the twinkling of an eye. However, Lin Sun still felt a little depressed, like a stone fortress in his heart. This is the bloodthirsty battlefield. After a long time, Lin Sun took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. After cleaning up the spoils on the field, he turned around and left. The sun was about to set, and it was as red as blood. Chapter 694. When he moved forward again, Lin Sun's luggage became much bulkier. It contained trophies, such as teeth of golden barbarians, eyes of water barbarians, chests and skin of fire barbarians, arms of earth barbarians. These parts were the locations of their respective totem tattoos. For voodoo barbarians, totem tattoos were the core of their power, just like the origin of practitioners' cultivation. It was only through these parts that one could determine the value of a military contribution. A quarter of an hour later, Lin Sun was ambushed by a group of strong voodoo barbarians. It was a small team, all of whom were barbarians, who posed no threat to Lin Sun at all. Instead of being ambushed, it was better to say that Lin Sun took the initiative to rush over. The massacre came to an end in an instant. There were pools of blood and corpses on the ground, and more military merits were added to Lin Sun's luggage. In the next few hours, Lin Sun successively encountered more than 10 groups of enemies, either actively attacking or passively encountering them. It was not a fierce battle, because there was no opponent who could threaten Lin Sun. Therefore, they were all swept away by him like a whirlwind. No one was spared. More and more trophies piled up in his luggage, but Lin Sun's mood gradually became a little heavy. He realized that the situation was not good. On the way to the camp of the Empire, almost all he saw were the traces of enemies. Even if he saw the figures of the Empire's practitioners, they were all corpses after being killed. This undoubtedly meant that the situation of the Empire's camp was not optimistic in the bloodthirsty battlefield. The old fox said that the bloodthirsty battlefield was the strongest line of defense to protect the empire. If even this line of defense was threatened, Lin Sun shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He didn't know the situation and couldn't speculate, but what he saw and felt along the way had made him realize that the situation of the Empire's practitioners would not be good in this cruel and bloody battlefield. Lin Sun knew himself well that it was impossible to change all this once and for all with his own strength. Perhaps the only thing he could do now was to kill as many enemies as possible and do his best to complete his task, and then survive. The sky was getting darker and darker. It was gloomy and oppressive. The strong wind swept across the barren land, stirring up the dust on the ground, making whimpering sounds that sounded like sobs and complaint. The smell of blood and rotting corpses lingered in the air for a long time. Lin Sun, who was moving forward, suddenly stopped. With a flash, he appeared in a shallow gully. Not far away, there was a shadow that was almost invisible. It had no aura and was attached to a rock at the side. It was like a reflection of a rock and could be seen normally. But Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. His body was stretched like a big bow in an instant, and his chi was running quietly. Whoosh! Without hesitation, he took off the insignificant bow and pulled the blood-red bowstring. An arrow, like lightning, tore the void and shot silently toward the shadow in the distance. Bang! The rocks there abruptly exploded, and a bottomless hole was blasted into the ground. However, the shadow had already disappeared in a strange flash. Lin Sun's eyes were as cold as lightning. He opened the insignificant bow with all his strength and shot a rain of arrows, covering different areas in a row. For a while there was a harsh explosion in this area. The earth was cracked, the rocks were pierced and shattered, and the void was torn apart. If other practitioners were here, they would be confused and think that Lin Sun was shooting randomly. Because from beginning to end, there was no trace of the enemy at all. But in Lin Sun's vision, there was a shadow flashing in this area. It was as fast as a ghost. Even with the insignificant bow, it was difficult to lock on it. This made Lin Sun look a little solemn. The insignificant bow had two magical functions of insight and absolute calm. Its origin was mysterious and unpredictable. In the past, it was almost successful. It was no exaggeration to say that even a peerless saint like Nyo Tunshin couldn't avoid this kind of lock with ease. But now, that wisp of shadow had accomplished it. Although the shadow was a little embarrassed, it could avoid so many shots, which was enough to move Lin Sun. He realized that he had met a tricky character this time. Whoosh! Whoosh! Lin Sun's face became calmer and his black eyes were cold. The bow made of white bones and skulls was constantly bent, and the bright red bowstring was pulled to the fullest, shooting silent illusory spirit arrows. Puff! Finally, the opponent was forced to the extreme. He was hit by a spirit arrow, and blood suddenly burst out. At the same time, a figure also appeared. This was a man shrouded in gray shadows, with a pair of gray-brown eyes and an extremely delicate and fair face. On his shoulder there was a blood mark, which was scratched by the arrow just now. Haha, not bad. Looking at the vitality flowing around you, you are just a teenager, but you have already stepped into Tao Insight realm. This may not be very powerful, but it's amazing that you can force me to show up with a bow. The man chuckled, and his gray-brown eyes narrowed slightly. He seemed to be thinking about something. When did such a person appear in the Empire? Why haven't I heard of you before? It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of me. It's enough for you to know that I'm going to kill you today. Lin Sun put away the insignificance bow and said calmly. He knew that it was difficult to kill the opponent with arrows alone, and using the insignificance bow consumed a lot of spiritual energy. In this way, he would undoubtedly suffer a loss. Don't talk big. The round of attack just now must have consumed a lot of your physical strength. What else can you do at this time? The man put his hands behind his back, and his voice was slow. He was like a shadow, which made it difficult for people to capture his real trace. Crack! As he spoke, a gray flying sword, which was almost invisible, suddenly appeared and cut Lin Sun's throat fiercely. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure disappeared. The flying sword cut the ground and broke a huge, unfathomable crack, which was shocking. Obviously, when the opponent spoke, he had already secretly attacked, which was extremely cruel and treacherous. It's interesting that you, a young boy, should have this kind of ability to change and perceive danger in advance, which really surprised me. The gray shadow man disappeared and hid in the dark. His breath was everywhere in the nearby area, but it was all looming. Obviously, he was trying to confuse Lin Sun. Accident? That's because you don't know. Lin Sun looked calm. He held the broken sword in his hand, and his huge spiritual power spread like a storm at this moment. In the sea of his consciousness, a bright moon was shining in the blue sky, surrounded by thousands of stars, which made Lin Sun's perception become clear in an instant, and he could see through everything in the world. Crack! Suddenly, the flying sword appeared again, almost sticking to Lin Sun's figure, to cut his neck from behind. This was a flying sword made of gray bones. Its color was restrained and simple, looming and almost transparent, but it was sharp and terrible. It seemed to be invincible and incredibly fast. Clang! Lin Sun didn't move, but the broken sword chopped the flying sword precisely as if it had eyes. Suddenly, there was a deafening sound of collision. Just the aftermath of the collision crushed and collapsed the nearby void, and the earth was blown up with thousands of holes. Smoke and dust roared. Chapter 695. Puff! Missing its target, the gray flying sword suddenly faded and disappeared. I didn't expect that your perception is better than I thought. But I can't let you live today. The voice of the gray shadow resounded through the area, with a hint of killing intent. Obviously, he realized Lin Sun's extraordinariness and wanted to kill him. Kill! Lin Sun didn't talk nonsense. This time, he caught a trace of the opponent's chi. Then he performed ice dragon steps and rushed out in an instant. Boom! The broken sword swept through the air, setting off bright starlight all over the sky. The saber light was like the sun, illuminating the world with terrible momentum. In the nothingness, the gray shadow was forced to show himself. He urged the flying sword to kill Lin Sun across the air. The sword edge was sharp and crisscrossed. Rumble! There was a roar in the area. Lin Sun held the broken sword in his hand, and his black eyes were like lightning. The power of his divine soul spread out and firmly locked the opponent. The gray shadow also looked extremely terrible. His fighting means were superb and cruel. His flying sword technique was close to Tao, and his killing intent was unparalleled. This was a top strongman of the dark barbarian branch. He was born to be proficient in assassination. His body movement was unpredictable and his swordsmanship was mysterious. He was like an unperceivable shadow, which was frightening. Among the 9 branches of Voodoo Barbarian, the Dark Barbarian branch was the most mysterious. Their number was extremely small, but each of them was like a king in the dark. In the past thousands of years, there were no less than hundreds of big shots who died in the hands of Dark Barbarian assassins. It was even rumored that there were real-life Death Realm kings in the Empire who were attacked by Dark Barbarian assassins and almost died. In the bloodthirsty camp, Shu Sanchi, the chief instructor, had said more than once that among the 9 branches of Voodoo Barbarian, Thunder Barbarian and Light Barbarian were the most powerful. But the most troublesome and frightening ones were undoubtedly the strongmen of the Dark Barbarian branch. This was because they were like natural assassins who lived in the shadows, and they could take away your life without you even noticing. Puff! A moment later, Lin Sun's shoulder was scratched by the gray flying sword, and a string of blood splashed out. This flying sword skill, which was close to Tao, was indeed mysterious and terrifying. Lin Sun was almost seriously injured by this blow. However, at the same time, His opponent was also struck by the blade aura of the broken blade. Half of his ear was cut off, causing blood to spurt out. He was just a hair's breadth away from his neck. "You actually injured me?" The gray-clothed man seemed to be shocked and angry at the same time. He let out a long howl, and his figure became even more illusory and strange. He was like a faintly discernible shadow that moved between heaven and earth. Boom! Lin Sun didn't say anything, but his eyes became calmer and colder. His body was surrounded by a clear divine light, and his battle saint technique was activated. The opponent's movements were looming, but Lin suddenly sped up. Ice dragon steps were like a dream, flashing in the void at an incredible speed. Bang! Bang! The two clashed. The broken blade and the flying sword collided, producing a terrifying destructive power that swept out in all directions. The blade light and sword chi even tore the void into countless cracks. The opponent was very strong. The Grand Wizard realm was no different from Lin Sun in terms of cultivation, but he was the first strong opponent in the same realm that Lin Sun met after returning from the Soul Oblivion Sea. During the battle, there was a moment when Lin Sun even thought that the opponent had already embarked on the path of the most powerful Tao, just like himself. This alone was enough to surprise Lin Sun. An assassin of the Dark Barbarians could have such a fighting capacity in the Grand Wizard realm. The opponent's identity in the Voodoo Barbarian tribe was bound to be not simple. It should be known that Lin Sun once killed 6 practitioners in the reincarnation development realm alone. Now, the opponent, who was almost at the same realm, could fight with Lin Sun until now. How could an ordinary Voodoo Barbarian be comparable to him? Kill! Lin Sun's killing intent was surging in his heart. He also had the idea of killing the opponent illegally to get rid of future troubles. If the opponent was allowed to live, he was bound to bring many unexpected killings to the practitioners of the Empire. Bang! Bang! This was a very fierce fight. The sword and the saber collided with each other, and the power was earth-shattering. Both of them were proficient in fighting, simple, direct, and not so complicated, but they understood the essence of fighting. This was the duel between two masters. If other practitioners rashly got involved at this time, they would probably be killed in an instant. Chop! A moment later, Lin Sun jumped up, and the broken sword chopped out like a divine rainbow sweeping across the sky. Boom! Even though the gray figure had dodged this attack, the terrifying aftershock caused his figure to stagger, and his originally handsome and fair face was suffused with a wisp of redness. Has he set foot on the legendary road? The gray shadow man looked surprised and dignified. His gray-brown pupils were burning with the fierce, fighting intent. The strength of the opponent made him excited and tremble in his heart. Kill! Lin Sun didn't care about this. The broken sword broke out with overwhelming momentum. The attack was so strong that it disturbed the surroundings and disrupted the wind and clouds. Puff! Just in a flash, the gray shadow man was injured again. A section of his long hair was cut off by the broken sword, and the skin on his back was torn by the sharp saber chi, leaving a bloody wound deep to the bone. After being injured, his figure was like a wisp of gray smoke. He had retreated thousands of meters close to the ground, but he laughed excitedly. Finally, I found my opponent. As long as I kill you, I can knock on the door of the strongest way and become the king of Grand Magi. Sorry, you have no chance. Lin Sun didn't hesitate at all. He continued to chase after the gray shadow man. The broken sword was as bright as a shining ice moon with amazing destructive power. Lin Sun locked the vital parts of the gray shadow man from a distance. Oh, you can't kill me. If we, the Dark Barbarians, want to escape, no one in the world can stop us. The gray shadow man fled like a flowing light. The air was torn apart, and the rocks and mountains along the way were all smashed like paper. Lin Sun chased after him with all his strength with Ice Dragon Step. Boom! The speed of both of them reached an appalling level. When the tearing explosion sounded in the void, their figures had already been tens of thousands of meters away. Even Lin Sun had to admit that this guy was really too difficult to kill. He was a little better than Yo Tunshin and Meng Lianqing. Moreover, the Gray Shadow Man was one of the best in the world in terms of strength, actual combat experience, and secret methods, but it was also because of this that Lin Sun was more determined to kill him. He was the enemy of the Empire. Once he rose, he was bound to be a big trouble. Without hesitation, Lin Sun changed his saber into a bow, took a deep breath, and ran all his strength to the extreme. His spirit was like a furnace of heaven and earth, burning and boiling at this moment. His black eyes were like a deep abyss, which could swallow the sun and the moon. In an instant, he seemed to be incarnated as a god coming to the world. Buzz! The rough and ferocious skeleton bow of insignificant bow was bent, and the bright red bowstring, which seemed to be soaked in blood, was pulled to the full in an instant. In an instant, there seemed to be the roar of a demon, and the sound of wind and thunder surged. Whoosh! However, when the spirit arrow was shot forth, it was completely silent, as if it were invisible, and it disappeared in a flash. The Gray Shadow Man, who was fleeing in the distance, suddenly trembled in his heart and felt cold all over his body. He noticed that an extreme danger was approaching at a high speed. With a strange cry, an animal skin flag suddenly appeared behind him, on which was written the blood-colored totem and the language of voodoo and barbarian, full of obscure and horrible breath. Bang! The animal skin flag glowed, and the blood-colored totem was running. But it only blocked for a moment, and then it was broken by the spiritual arrow. Almost at the same time, the Gray Shadow Man let out a scream. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. It was an arrow from a supreme king of Tao Insight realm. His back was pierced, and there was a bowl-sized bloody hole, which made his face twisted in pain, and he almost fell to the ground. The blood-patterned flag is a treasure of our clan. How could it fail to block that arrow? Could that bow be a powerful artifact? The Gray Shadow Man was shocked, and his face changed completely, losing his calm. However, he was extremely strong and had excellent combat experience. While escaping, a pair of wings suddenly appeared behind him. The wings were gray and hazy like the wings of a bat. With a light flap, a swish resounded out, and it allowed the gray figure to traverse a distance of over 10 kilometers, and it was an entire 2 times faster than before. This was the Shadow Feather, not a treasure, but a supreme secret method belonging to the Dark Barbarians, which needed to burn one's own blood and chi to exert. The Gray Shadow Man didn't want to hurt himself like this unless it was a desperate time. It's really hard to deal with. Behind him, Lin Sun also sped up, with a murderous look on his face. Bang! Before long, Lin Sun's body was shining, and his breath was so strong that it pierced the sky. At this moment, he was like an archer in ancient times. He stretched his slender body and shot the second arrow. Puff! The man's umber feather was blasted apart by the arrow. Unfortunately, the arrow was still a hair's breadth away from killing him. It only managed to cut off one of his arms. Even so, the Gray Shadow Man was frightened, panicked, and angry. It was the first time he felt frustrated since he started cultivating. He couldn't believe that there was such a young man in the Empire. It was so terrible that he had never heard of him before. Escape. The Gray Shadow Man gritted his teeth, realizing that he might really die today. Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. With his current strength, even a great practitioner in the reincarnation developing realm would have been shot into a hornet's nest. But the Gray Shadow Man could still persist until now, which was not a fluke, but a manifestation of strength. He must be killed. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and shot the third arrow with his eyes as calm as ice. In an instant, the Gray Shadow Man's hair stood on end, and his skin was covered with a layer of goosebumps. For him, the young man behind him was just like a devil, too horrible. He fled desperately, but unfortunately, he still couldn't escape. A spiritual arrow went straight through his chest, setting off a string of hot scarlet blood. Ah, he couldn't help screaming. This arrow almost killed him, and he had a sense of despair as if he was struggling before death. Boom. However, it had to be said that the Grey Shadow Man was too terrible. In just a moment, his blood and chi surged as if it was burning, and his momentum was even stronger than before. When he fled, his figure was almost invisible, and his speed was so fast that it was terrifying. Obviously, he had activated some terrible secret method. Lin Sun was almost speechless and wanted to curse. It was the first time that he met such a difficult opponent, which proved that the opponent's origin was not simple. Chapter 696. The vitality of the man in gray was indeed abnormal. Besides, he had mastered many wonderful secret methods, and his fighting capacity was extraordinarily fierce and treacherous. It was difficult for Lin Sun to kill such a person immediately. It could be imagined how prominent this man was in the voodoo barbarian alien tribe. If he was allowed to live in the bloodthirsty battlefield, he would only bring unpredictable hidden dangers to the camp of the Empire. Because he was a born assassin who was proficient in assassination, Lin Sun threw caution to the wind. Even if he knew that continuous consumption of physical strength in the extremely dangerous bloodthirsty battlefield would be disadvantageous to him, he would not hesitate to do so. Bang! Another spiritual arrow shot out like a soul-locking divine rainbow, ethereal and unpredictable. In a flash, half of the man's body was blown up and blood splashed. The man in gray screamed miserably. He almost fainted because of the pain. Since he started his cultivation, he had never been hunted like this, nor had he experienced such an embarrassing and dangerous encounter. This made him mad with anger and tremble with fear. At this time, he deeply realized the horror of the so-called strongest way. Even though he was about to touch this realm, he had not reached it yet. Because of this, he underestimated the horror of Lin Sun before. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure flashed and rushed forward crazily. The man in gray was on the verge of collapse and couldn't hold on any longer. It was the best time to kill him. But halfway, Lin Sun suddenly stopped and stared into the distance with his black eyes in surprise. Damn it! Lin Sun couldn't help cursing in his heart. Then he decisively retreated in the opposite direction without hesitation, and his speed was 3 times faster than before. Boom! As soon as Lin Sun left, a horrible breath came to this area, like the arrival of a dominator, which changed the weather and set off a terrible wind. Young lord! With a cry of surprise, a skinny, dark-skinned old man surrounded by rolling gray airflow suddenly appeared. Looking at the miserable man in gray whose half-body was blown up, the old man's face turned blue, and a pair of terrifying beams burst out of his eyes. Young lord, please bear with it for the time being. I'll kill the thief first. In an instant, the old man found Lin Sun, who was fleeing in the distance with his terrifying spiritual thoughts. Don't go! However, just as the old man was about to make his move, the gray figure roared angrily to stop him. Young master, the opportunity is fleeting. The old man panicked. I said, don't go! The gray shadow man roared. His expression was extremely ugly. He opened his mouth and swallowed a pill. Immediately, his whole body surged with blood chi, and the half of his body that was originally broken actually recovered in the blink of an eye. But his countenance was extremely ghastly pale to the point it was practically translucent, and his aura was weak to the point of being on the verge of collapse, causing him to seem as if he would collapse at any moment. That kid is my prey. No one is allowed to touch him except me. The gray-clothed man gritted his teeth, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Today's defeat was a great humiliation to him, and there was a kind of suppressed anger in his heart. Most importantly, since he'd started cultivating until now, he'd finally seen the strongest path towards the Tao of Legend for the first time. It was even to the extent that he noticed that if he wanted to step foot into this realm, then killing that young man from the human race was the most effective method. This was the reason why he stopped the old man. "Young master, who was it just now that was able to injure you?" The old man knew that he'd already lost the best opportunity to kill his opponent now. But he was extremely puzzled that there was actually someone in the bloodthirsty battlefield that was capable of defeating the young master. This was too unbelievable. He was very clearly aware that as the prince of the dark barbarians, the young master's natural talent was extremely shocking, and the young master deserved to be the #1 expert in the younger generation of the dark barbarians. It was even to the extent that the king of the dark barbarians had once said that by relying on the young master's natural talent, it was sufficient for the young master to have a place of his own when the great battle of the world arrived. But now the young master had lost. Moreover, he'd lost so miserably and was almost in danger of losing his life. How could the old man not be shocked by this? If news of this were to be spread back to the dark barbarians, it would surely cause an uproar. Even if the other 8 lineages of the shaman barbarians found out about this, they would still be shocked. Their dark barbarians possessed the most extraordinary and mysterious status amongst the 9 lineages. Now, their prince that possessed the most natural talent had almost been killed. How could anyone not be shocked? When he thought about how if he'd arrived slightly later this time, then the old man would have been terrified to the point of breaking out in cold sweat, and this caused his expression to become even more unsightly. He wished for nothing more than to charge over immediately and kill that enemy. "Huang Yun, you know that the objective of my tempering in the bloodthirsty battlefield in these past few years is none other than to rely on slaughter to step onto the true absolute path towards the Tao." The gray-cloaked man took a deep breath and said slowly, "Yet today I've seen it. I've personally experienced the formidability of the absolute path towards the Tao. Its strength is absolutely beyond imagination, and it's like a king of a realm that's invincible in this realm." As he finished speaking, his eyes emanated a blazing expression. "What I want is an opponent like this. Only by killing him would I be able to obtain the critical factor to step foot onto the absolute peak." That opponent was actually a supreme king of the heavenly abode realm. The old man gasped in his heart, and he was slightly shocked. How many years had it been since he'd heard of such an expert being born in the Empire? Why would one suddenly appear today? Suddenly, a strong sense of regret arose in the old man's heart. If he'd known this earlier, he should have killed him immediately. Once such a guy rose, it would absolutely be a disaster for the voodoo barbarian tribe. "Mangio, I need you to do one thing." Suddenly, the gray-cloaked man said, "Go and collect some information about this person for me. I want the most detailed information. I need to have a comprehensive understanding of this opponent." The old man called Mangio asked, "Young master, what does this person look like? How old is he, and does he have any specific characteristics?" The gray-cloaked man thought for a moment, described Lin's appearance, and then said, "It should be easy to find him, because he's definitely no more than 20 years old, and he's still a teenager. If I'm not mistaken, he should have just arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield. A teenager, setting foot on the absolute path of the heavenly abode realm?" Mangio's heart trembled, and his face changed slightly. Such a young man had set foot on the king realm, which was too terrifying. "Remember, you're only responsible for the information. If you dare to attack him and ruin my plan, I'll never spare you," the gray-cloaked man said coldly, staring at Mangio with an inviolable look. He knew Mangio's ability. Mangio had already set foot on the barbarian king realm, and could be called a half-step king. If he attacked personally, he would definitely be able to kill the teenager. But this was not what he wanted. "This old servant understands." Mangio took the order. Even if he didn't agree with it, he had to obey. And for a half-step king like him to act like this, it was conceivable how lofty the status of this gray-cloaked man was in the dark barbarian tribe. The opportunity has come. This time I must seize it, the gray-cloaked man murmured, and his eyes flashed with determination. Hundreds of miles away, Lin Sun's face was gloomy, and there was a strong unwillingness in his heart. He was just one step away from killing the gray-cloaked man, but his plan was ruined by a terrifying figure who suddenly arrived, which made Lin Sun want to curse. Although that terrifying aura is slightly weaker than that of a real life-and-death king, it's not much worse. I'm afraid such a character has already set foot on the king realm. Lin Sun was also a little vigilant. In the bloodthirsty battlefield, there were big shots at the level of life-and-death king, which made it even more dangerous. However, Lin Sun also knew that under normal circumstances, such characters would never be dispatched easily. Even if they were dispatched, they would only be dealing with existences at the same level as them. It's getting dark. Lin Sun was awestruck. He didn't dare to think too much and rushed to the place where the sun set. When night fell, the bloodthirsty battlefield would be 10 times or even 100 times more terrifying than it was during the day. Many unpredictable disasters and dangers would appear. Both the enemy and the practitioners on the Empire's side would rarely choose to act at night. This was what Zhao Tailai had specially told him. Swish! Lin Sun's figure flashed forward, and from time to time, there was a cracking sound in his hands. It was the sound of high-grade spiritual crystals being crushed into powder after their power was absorbed. The fierce battle just now had consumed a lot of Lin Sun's physical strength, so he had to hurry to replenish it. At this moment, the harsh environment of the bloodthirsty battlefield showed that there was no spiritual energy at all, so Lin Sun could only rely on spiritual crystals and elixirs to replenish his energy. The most fatal thing was that Lin Sun's unparalleled cultivation might enable him to fight for a long time, but at the same time, he needed to consume an astonishing number of high-grade spiritual crystals to restore his strength. According to Lin Sun's estimation, the batch of high-grade spiritual crystals he brought could only last him 7 days at most. If he encountered a fierce battle, the consumption would only be faster. The only thing that reassured Lin Sun was that in the camp of the Empire, he could get the corresponding materials by virtue of his military merits. Among them were spiritual crystals and elixirs. Along the way, the traces of enemies he encountered gradually became fewer, which meant that he was not far from the camp of the Empire. Even so, there were more than a dozen battles on the way, but they were all spies and outposts of the voodoo barbarians. There were no powerful figures. Lin Sun defeated them all the way and unexpectedly gained a lot of trophies. Before long, the night finally fell. Between heaven and earth, there was suddenly an oppressive atmosphere of dead silence. The sound of the wind stopped, and the bloody and rancid smell in the air seemed to stagnate and freeze. There was a kind of creepy dead silence, so quiet that it was terrible. Lin Sun turned around abruptly. With his immense spiritual power, he sensed that there seemed to be many horrors in the desolate world behind him that couldn't be perceived. Sure enough, the bloodthirsty battlefield in the dark night is the most terrible. Lin Sun was also frightened. Without hesitation, he strode forward. In front of him, there was a watchtower, which was thousands of meters high. The lights on it were very eye-catching in the dark night, as if they had been lit since ancient times. Further away, it could be clearly seen that rows of lights, like fire dragons, coiled over a mountain range and illuminated the night sky. A flag of xiao flower was hanging on the watchtower, illuminated by the lights. Every flower seemed to be soaked in blood, blooming in the night, with a solemn atmosphere. This was the camp of the Empire. It was the strongest line of defense of the Empire, in which the elite troops of the Empire were stationed, as well as many different forces of practitioners. They were stationed here, defending the territory of the Empire behind them, fighting here and living here forever. When Lin Sun saw the lamp, the flag, and the military camp buildings that were as dazzling as fire dragons, he recalled a sentence again. Xiao flower is invincible because of the bloodthirsty, and the Empire lives forever because of the war. Who are you? Lin Sun was still thousands of meters away from the watchtower when a shout sounded. At the same time, a beam of light swept over, illuminating Lin Sun's figure in the night. Lin Sun squinted slightly and immediately found that there were dense guards around the watchtower. They were all armed with weapons, and their breath was sharp and chilling. Hey, a little guy? Who brought you here? Where are your parents? Why did you arrive at the camp so late at night? A guard poked his head out of the watchtower and asked loudly. But soon, he narrowed his eyes and noticed that there was a huge luggage like a hill on Lin Sun's back, which seemed very impactful. Boss, the luggage seems to be full of... Someone whispered. God, I smell the bloody smell of voodoo barbarian bastards. I can even judge that there are the teeth of gold barbarian bastards, the chest of fire barbarian bastards, and the arms of earth barbarian bastards. So many. There was a burst of whispers near the watchtower. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun was keenly aware that many eyes were unscrupulously glancing at him. Especially when they noticed the luggage on his back, there was more or less a touch of greed in their eyes. Little guy, put down the luggage on your back. We need to check it, otherwise we can't let you into the camp. The guard commander on the watchtower opened his mouth. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's eyes, and an imperceptible killing intent appeared on his face. The camp of the Empire could be said to be impregnable and heavily guarded. However, they should be wary of the voodoo barbarians, not the practitioners of the Empire like him. Similarly, Lin Sun had never heard that the carry-on belongings should be checked before entering the gate of a camp. Whether it was the guard commander or the nearby guards, it was obvious that they were deliberately making things difficult for Lin Sun. The greed in their eyes also made Lin Sun realize that they were up to no good. Since he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield today, Lin Sun had almost killed all the way. He had thought that he could have a good rest when he arrived at the camp, but he never thought that he would encounter such a thing. This made him feel a little bad at once. He was not afraid of killing enemies, but he hated the strife and provocation of the practitioners in the same camp. Lin Sun stood there motionless, which made the guard commander very unhappy. Lin Sun was just a teenager alone, but he dared not to obey the order. His face darkened. He spat a mouthful of thick phlegm and shouted, "Little guy, why don't you obey the order? Do you have ulterior motives? It's too strange that you're the only one who's late at night." As he said, he waved his hand and ordered, "Come on, bring him here. I have reason to suspect that this boy is a spy sent by voodoo barbarian bastards. We must check him carefully." Chapter 697. The guards stationed in the camp were all experienced veterans. At first glance, they knew that Lin Sun should be a newcomer. He might even be a rogue hunter who worked for a big force. After all, his appearance was so strange. It was obvious that he came to the Camp 7 for the first time. In their eyes, Lin Sun suddenly became a fat sheep that could be ruthlessly slaughtered. When they heard the order of the guard leader, more than a dozen guards immediately rushed out with murderous intent and stared at Lin Sun maliciously. Lin Sun frowned. The animal skin manual didn't explain how to deal with such a situation. However, Lin Sun didn't spend his time in the bloodthirsty camp in vain. Seeing this scene, he stood still, and the murderous intent on his face disappeared. He became more indifferent and calm. "Come on, let me check whether this boy is a spy or not first." A sturdy man rushed forward excitedly and rubbed his palms. With a keen sense of smell, he had long noticed that there were many good things in the luggage on Lin Sun's back. Bang! However, when he was still 3 meters away from Lin Sun, he knelt down on the ground with a puff as if he was pressed by Mount Tai. The guards behind him also staggered, and their expressions changed drastically. It was as if they were drunk, and they were being suppressed by a formless and terrifying pressure. After that, a wave of thumps resounded out as those guards knelt down with flushed faces, and their knees ceaselessly emitted cracking sounds. "Aren't you going to check my things? Why do you suddenly kneel down? Are you greeting me respectfully?" Lin Sun looked surprised. The whole place was silent. The other guards stationed near the watchtower all gasped and realized that something was wrong. Their companions were all ruthless people who lived on the edge of a knife. None of them was ordinary, since they could survive in the harsh and dangerous bloodthirsty battlefield until now. But now, they knelt down directly before the boy. This was too shocking. "How dare you?" One of the guards who was kneeling on the ground roared angrily and struggled to get up. However, in just an instant, he was pressed down on the ground again, and his bones were almost broken. Today, Lin Sun was already a supreme king. His power was honed by countless bloody battles. Not to mention these guards who only had the cultivation of Sea Spirit Realm, even a strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm would not dare to confront him head-on. Kacha kacha. On the ground, the bodies of those guards twitched as if a mountain was pressing down on them. Their faces were pale while cold sweat broke out on their foreheads, and the muscles and bones in their entire bodies emitted sounds of friction from being unable to bear the heavy burden and were on the verge of breaking apart. The pressure was getting stronger and stronger. If this were to continue, then they would definitely be pressured to the point of bleeding from all 7 apertures, and the bones and tendons in their bodies would explode into pieces. This finally made them feel fear, and they realized that they had encountered a tough opponent. How was this a fat sheep? It was clearly a wolf in sheep's clothing. "Friend, let's talk this out." On the watchtower, the guard commander hurriedly shouted. His expression changed as well, and he gasped endlessly. Just his aura alone was able to crush those guards. Such a character caused even him to feel horrified. As he spoke, he had already rushed down from the watchtower. "It's you who don't want to talk this out, right?" Lin Sun glanced at the guard commander with a touch of coldness in his black eyes. The guard commander suddenly felt as if an invisible sharp blade was pressed against his throat. The breath of fatal danger made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Cold sweat gushed out like a waterfall and soaked his whole body. This scared him out of his wits. Those who could stand in the bloodthirsty battlefield all had a very keen intuition for danger. The leader of the guards was a well-known figure amongst them. At this instant, he realized that this young man who had come alone under the veil of night was definitely an extremely terrifying figure. "We have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us for offending you, Your Excellency." The guard commander bowed deeply. His heart was still pounding, and he felt a kind of unspeakable depression and tension. Lin Sun withdrew his pressure and said, "It's my first time here. I know nothing. If I offended you just now, I hope you don't mind." The guard commander secretly breathed a sigh of relief, wiped off his cold sweat, and said with a forced smile, "We have eyes but failed to see. It's already a great kindness that Your Excellency doesn't care about it." Yes. Those guards who had been suppressed on the ground also got up. Their eyes on Lin soon changed with a touch of deep fear. The guards near the watchtower also looked at each other in dismay. Realizing that they had encountered a tough opponent this time, they didn't dare to talk nonsense anymore. This was to establish power. Whether in the bloodthirsty camp or in the military camp, it was enough to make these wily old foxes admit defeat by showing their strength directly. Lin Sun didn't want to entangle with them. With a bang, he threw the huge luggage on his back to the ground, clapped his hands and said, "As I said, I don't know the rules. Since you want to inspect me, I won't disagree. The reason why I was rude just now was that your attitude was wrong." As soon as Lin Sun said this, the guard commander and other guards all looked embarrassed. Indeed, they thought they had encountered a fat sheep. Although they said it was an inspection, it was actually greed in their hearts. Seeing Lin Sun's polite attitude at the moment, the guard commander increasingly felt that the young man in front of him was not simple. He pondered for a while and said, "Well, the rules can't be broken. In this case, let's inspect him and let him enter the military camp as soon as possible." The nearby guards responded loudly. The so-called inspection was just a perfunctory Everyone could see that Lin Sun couldn't be a spy of the voodoo barbarians. But since Lin Sun insisted, they had to cooperate with him. However, when the huge hill-like luggage was opened, there was a sound of gasping in the field. There were bloody spoils of war everywhere. Too many of them were densely packed. Most of them were the trophies harvested from the voodoo barbarians, and there were also trophies at the senior witch level. My God! There are almost 19 senior witch level military merits and hundreds of barbarian level military merits. The guard commander and the guards in the field all gasped and looked at Lin Sun with more and more fear. This young man was too ferocious. He was just one person, yet he had reaped so many bloody military merits. One could only imagine how abnormal his strength was. Hey! This broken hand seems to be a little special. Suddenly, a figure rushed out of the military camp. It was an old man in a gray robe with white hair and beard, and even his eyebrows were white. At this moment, he came close and stared at a broken hand for the first time. With a touch of surprise on his face, he looked at Lin Sun and asked, "Where did you get this broken hand?" Lin Sun frowned. "You are? My lord, this is Lord Lu Wenting, the quartermaster of our number 7 military camp. He is in charge of the supplies of the military camp." The guard commander next to him quickly explained. Lin Sun said, "Is there something wrong with this broken hand?" Lu Wenting didn't care about Lin Sun's cold attitude. He shook his head and said, "No problem, but this broken hand seems to be from a strong dark barbarian royal family, which is very rare." There was another sound of gasping. The nearby guards were all dumbfounded. A broken hand of a dark barbarian royal family? My God! Did this young lord kill a strong dark barbarian royal family? They knew that the dark barbarian royal family was absolutely the top existence among assassins, just like the peerless talents among human practitioners. They were incredibly powerful. Such assassins were proficient in stealth and escaping skills. They were like natural kings in the shadows. Even a great practitioner of reincarnation development realm couldn't kill them. But now, a broken hand of a dark barbarian royal family was in front of them. Didn't this mean? They all looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun was stunned and said thoughtfully, "It turns out that the guy is a descendant of the dark barbarian royal family. No wonder he is so difficult to kill." He thought of the Shadow Man and couldn't help feeling a little depressed. What a pity! He almost killed that guy. After getting Lin Sun's confirmation, the guard leader and others were all stunned. "It was true, young friend. You must be in urgent need of military merits, right? Please come with me." Lu Wenting seemed to attach great importance to the broken hand. Regardless of Lin Sun's origin, he directly wanted to take him to the barrack. "All right." Lin Sun nodded and followed Lu Wenting to the barrack. Watching them leave, the guard leader and others all breathed a sigh of relief. They were still frightened that they almost offended a hidden killer just now. The barracks were brightly lit, and numerous buildings were arranged in neat rows along a mountain range. They were densely packed, yet they seemed to be in an orderly manner. As night fell, the barracks seemed to be very lively. Imperial practitioners could be seen everywhere. Each of them was extremely capable and had a unique iron-blooded evil spirit. This was the temperament that could only be honed by fighting for a long time. Ordinary practitioners didn't have it at all. Military supplies. Lu Wenting hurriedly arranged 2 subordinates to help Lin Sun count the spoils of war, while he picked up the broken hand and looked at it carefully. After a while, he raised his head with a strange expression and stared at Lin Sun, saying, "There is no doubt that this is indeed the broken hand of a descendant of the Dark Shadow royal family. Its palm pattern is branded with the totem of Shadow Sword, belonging to the Dark Barbarian royal family. It can't be fake." But, as if knowing what Lu Wenting was going to ask, Lin Sun said directly, "He is not dead." Lu Wenting was disappointed and sighed. That's right. How could such a peerless character be killed casually? Lin Sun didn't explain. Although he was sure that he could kill the opponent, the guy was rescued in the end. Even if he explained, no one would believe him. However, Lu Wenting's reaction confirmed Lin Sun's previous speculation. The Grey Shadow Man was indeed a special character with an extraordinary background. Your Excellency, the Count is finished. There are a total of 19 senior magi and 216 strongmen. Adding them up, they can be classified as 1 second-class merit and 2 third-class merit. The two subordinates said respectfully. When they glanced at Lin Sun, they couldn't help feeling surprised. It seemed that they didn't expect that such a young man could get such merits. No, we should also add the broken hand. Lu Wenting thought for a while and made a decision directly. Let's count them as 2 second-class merits. By the way, I don't know your name and which military camp you come from? As he said, he looked at Lin Sun apologetically. He was so concerned about the broken hand that he forgot to ask about the origin of the young man in front of him. P.S. On the WeChat official account of Goldfish, Orange Melon app has organized a lucky draw. There are Apple 7 and some commemorative prizes. It seems that you can draw 3 times a day until the 15th. If you are interested, you can add me on WeChat. Open WeChat and search for the official account, Xiaojinyu233, to add your followers.